Hello guys. Well, basically, I don't know if you already been in this space, but we will speak about a few small details that until now escape me. One of those details is um, the impossibility for one side in this war to manage their basis of fire, and that part, unfortunately, is Ukraine for the moment. Why I say unfortunately is because when you cannot manage your base of fire, you have a problem with logistics, and you have also a problem with projecting yourself forward. Uh, what is managing your base of fire? Well, managing your base of fire is exactly how many ammunition you need to suppress a point, and usually from my experience, but as a tanker and not at all as a artilleryman, that's something different. The base of fire should be that you start very hard and then you reduce your consumption because whoever you're supporting with fire has already advanced the point you want to overtake, occupied it, and is ready to move forward. This is with Ukraine, unfortunately, hasn't happened. Ukrainians are still wasting a lot of ammunition in offense. And in this offense, what they are missing the most is the concentration of fire on positions they need to acquire immediately. I'm going to make a point here. Let's, for instance, regard how they took Staromayorsk. They made a very nice video on how fast it was, how exceptionally well done it was, and you could feel that within 2 days they had wrapped up the operation. In fact, Staromayorsk took about 4 weeks, and during those 4 weeks, we discovered after the fact that they had lost about 10% more assets than the Russians, of course. They had done a lot more damage artillery-wise. Russians had lost between 18 and 20 artillery assets around Staromayorsk, but Ukrainians had lost a huge number of maneuver assets. According to Warspot and Oryx, there should be like about 45 or 47 vehicles around the area of Staromayorsk. So that's why I wanted to point this out. Ukrainians love their PR. They make extremely good PR. And honestly, if PR could win a war, Ukraine would be world champion by now because most of their productions are extremely well crafted. However, once you see where they are, both in depth and also in results, you can only just laugh because it's even worse than what the Russians achieved in last year after they captured Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. And why was this problem about the base of fire? Well, basically, once they got Staromayorsk, they had to push through Urozhanye. However, the expense of artillery, when you see both cities, so both Staromayorsk and Urozhanye, or hamlets, villages, whatever you want to call them, the devastation is huge because they keep firing at them and are not able to sustain a proper, efficient result from fire solutions. So basically, they keep firing until there is nobody there, instead of keep firing, securing the advance of their mobility assets, and then the mobility assets do their job and it's done. Here we have a huge problem. While mostly, I think, because the Ukrainians had prepared a certain amount of material for this counter per area. I have explained this before when I was basically under other circumstances. People would know that. Basically, the division was for Zaporozhye and probably Kherson because there were plans for crossing the Dnieper before the dam was blown. That concentrated there about 60% of their whole forces. and then it was 2020. 20 to hold the line up north, and 20 for Bahmut. This probably was changed once the dam was blown. There, the token force that remains has nothing to do with the counter forces as of now, because it's mostly the 73rd, special forces outfit that is busy sacrificing people, going back and forth into the other bank of the Dnieper. And also a couple of old shitty units, a couple of territorial units, and Presidential Guard, who loves getting whacked for photo ops in Kherson. All the rest, all the forces that were slated for the counter, between 25 and 40,000 people, I honestly think that those forces actually have been battered, so that's why they supplemented them with ad hoc units from terror-burst sources. Then they were spread, in my opinion, 50, 30, 20, and 50% of this force, so let's say 20,000 people, about 800 to 900 pieces of equipment. I think it's more than 700 to 800 pieces of equipment for Zaporozhye, then about 30% for Bakhmut and northeastern Donetsk. Actually, in this case, it's more Western Donetsk for them, but Eastern Donetsk for Ukraine. And then about 20% for Svatovo. Why? Because in Svatovo, they thought that, okay, if these guys have a huge ass forest there, the Serebranka forest, and then the northern Donetsk, which is almost impassable, we are fine. We don't need to care. The only thing that we need to do right now is just clench our butt cheeks, hope that the Zaporizhzhia Hail Mary works, and then the Russians themselves are going to divest from the north because they need to hold the south. However, straight off the bat, the real counteroffensive started in Bakhmut, basically. So let's put that straight. The 28th of May, the first counteroffensive moves were made in Bakhmut, and they were extremely efficient. This sparked a lot of dooming. That's why I'm dunking right now on Murz, because Murz, a comms guy from the DNR, literally said we're so fucked, and I posted what he said in July, but there was another post in June which was scathing for the Russians, and also Wagner was shitting all over the 72nd on the area, saying they were shit and this and that. And there was a point there. The Russians had not time to actually dug in the softer belly. They had positions that were laid by Wagner, but the problem is that Wagner never reinforced them. The whole principle of Wagner was to overpower the enemy by having the initiative non-stop. This, however, causes a lot of losses. So basically, Wagner never had to really dig in expansive trenches. They literally overtook what Ukrainians had left. And when you see how the trenches are made actually in Klishivka, you can see that they managed to hold someone out of the heights in Klishivka, not in. So basically, when you want to hold the same trenches on the other side, you have the rather advantageous position. But then at some point, you are forced to a counterslope. So if the guys are above you, they're going to fucking slaughter you. But this works also if once you quit that counterslope and try to go to Klishivka, Ukrainians get slashed as well. Anyway, this is just a point to say why in the beginning the area around Bakhmut, Ivanisk, and so on was so problematic. However, the situation wasn't that bad in Bakhmut. Why wasn't it as bad? I already explained back in the day. There is way too much real estate behind all these areas that these people want to do. But the logic for the Ukrainian army was to cut the highway that were going south towards Bakhmut. But the reality is that the Russians simply do not need it because they got Soledar up north. Of course, this constrains the transfers and the resupply and everything. But then the Ukrainians themselves are going to be stretched. And one of the biggest problems that we saw in the attempted counter-strike by the Russians around Klishivka, but outside, so on the heights, is that there is a choke point there with this huge canal / reservoir that cuts Bakhmut from the rest of the Ukrainian dominated lands. And this thing basically works both sides. It's literally a choke point for both sides. And that's why when the Russians lost it, or at least lost access to it, a lot of people started getting scared. But the reality was a bit less interesting. First of all, you needed bodies there, but also you needed an efficient defense. And this is what happened. Once the Zaporozhye counteroffensive was blunted, and this is around the end of July, when literally there was this slaughter of BMPs and tanks around Rabotino, part of the teams that were defending that point literally were switched into the Bakhmut area. It was not too far. This is also one thing I'm going to tell later on the space. It was not too far, so the move actually was imperceptible. The guys in Bakhmut, the Ukrainians in Bakhmut, never saw it coming. It's not like what happened in Kherson, where literally you could see a huge squish from Belogorovka going down to Kherson to defend the counter last year. Here it's a completely different aspect. Here you got about 80 kilometers of transfer of troops from Vuhledar up to Bakhmut, and that's it. And 80 kilometers can be one day, and for teams that are busy with Lancets, electronic warfare, and everything, it takes very little time. So you will not notice when Lancets are going to start falling on you. And as you can see, more and more videos are now not concentrating artillery in Zaporozhye, because in Zaporozhye, the artillery, unfortunately for Russians, is not the main part of the situation. Ukrainians have less and less need for artillery in Zaporozhye as it stands, because if that artillery speaks, then it gets a Lancet in the face. What is working mostly in Zaporozhye, and it's not as a counter battery, it's just literally as suppression, is mostly HIMARS. And this, unfortunately, is a problem, because for now, the HIMARS is not untouchable, but would need, as I said before things happen, a complex and different approach, which would be even more autistic than what happened for the M77 Lotto Bingo. And that requires a lot more focus on really one tangential point in this case. And this is, I don't think that the Russians want to start doing too much fuss over the HIMARS. This, of course, is partly a problematic situation, but this is for later. Right now, we are just discussing how the counter started. The counter started, as I said, in Bakhmut and not in Zaporozhye. In Bakhmut, initially, the logic was to try and cause this thought that we are not attacking. You are a small digression here. Maybe you know Spawn of Khan, Thucydides, whatever, the Anafoid, and the bullshitter who said that I cannot believe the Russians are so illiterate. You can see that there is nothing behind Bakhmut, and Bakhmut's going to be a huge success. The moment I read that back then, I said, this is an absolute nonsense, because after Bakhmut, you got non-stop higher ground and non-stop small hamlets and cities. The other problem with Bakhmut is that on top of all these things, you are not going there within the cover of your artillery. Right now, the Ukrainian artillery in Bakhmut is being called, but it's being called up to 30 kilometers behind it. So Bakhmut does not allow you, by this level of both sides, does not allow you to actually push that much further, unless it's a diversion and unless it's a kind of attempt to suck up more resources that it needs. This is why initially I think the Russians didn't pay that much attention. On top of it, Bakhmut, whatever you want to tell about it, it's still territory that Russians took from the Ukrainians this year. So it's not that they're losing actual positions, like would be in Zaporozhye, which of course they took from Ukrainians, but needs to be solidified because it serves a specific purpose. Bakhmut per se, for the Russians as it stands, is important, but it is nowhere as important as the Ukrainians. For the Russians, Bakhmut at the end was literally a chore, because it should have been wrapped around March. It took even more time because the shenanigans from our dickhead friend and I used to like the guy, and I still like him as a character, but he's a fucker. So Prigozhin. I think Prigozhin literally stole the 2 last months of the operation because he had that feeling that if he got it, like basically he was gonna get discharged or sent in R&R or whatever. And from there, I think the escalation started. That culminated in 23rd and 24th of June. All the bullshit. So it starts in Bakhmut, then it picks up in Zaporozhye. It's an absolute disaster in Zaporozhye. They get absolutely smacked. The three first waves of attack are completely slaughtered, and it was really funny because the first stat sheet from the Zaporozhye counter from Oryx reads 96-54, something like that, in asset lost. And don't forget, the first fucking week of the counter, HIMARS were so fucking pervasive that they were literally hitting at trucks circulating on the highway. And a lot of losses were due to the fact that HIMARS were striking early on because they had identified positions. Now, since then, if you check week by week, the losses in artillery are less and less, mostly because the Russians are starting to adapt to it, but also mostly because they are letting the Ukrainians a lot more inside, which means that, for instance, if the Ukrainians want to hit deeper, they are not going to be able to use HIMARS as they want because the support with HIMARS is extremely accurate. I'm not going to lie about it, but there is no continuous support unless you start fucking lobbing missile after missile after missile after missile to support the advance of your troops. The problem with that is that you don't have all those missiles. If you saw the last 4 shipments, the Ukrainians get more and more HIMARS missiles, despite the fact that we know that the production yearly has not picked up as before, and is barely at 5,000, and is barely sufficient for the Ukrainians to keep doing what they're doing right now. And this is one of the reasons what they are starting to understand what's going on. HIMARS is better used like we saw in training camps or whatever they can find via ISR. But if you want to sustain a counteroffensive and you start lobbing 2-3 missiles per single fucking house out of nowhere in Urozhanye or Zabadne or whatever, then pretty soon you're going to have to destroy 200 to 300 houses to put a pathway. Yes, Gammon, I saw you, man. I'm gonna, you know how it works, so I'm gonna add you guys at the end for discussion. But anyway, the biggest problem that we have is that the reorganization, the firepower base that the Ukrainians tried to do, especially when they got the Storm Shadows, Scalps, and now probably also Taurus, although the Germans are refusing because they don't have that many that are in state of being thrown away. Is that Taurus and Storm Shadows were supposed to actually replace the HIMARS in Kherson, because in Kherson, and if you check my last post about what I think that the Ukrainians are doing in Robotine, in Kherson the depth was about 30 to 45 kilometers with the immediate bank, so with Oleshki. Here they are at least 90. So HIMARS needs to get to the lock. It cannot reach on the back. So what do you need to reach on the back? Well, you need cruise missiles, in this case, the SS and whatever. And the advantage with the SS is that you can also hit Crimea. Until recently, from the beginning, Snake could vouch for that. My idea was the Storm Shadows are not that numerous, so I would use them primarily for the fleet because it would give you a huge respite in cruise missile attacks. However, the Ukrainians, for some absolutely incomprehensible reason, instead of threatening the fleet, they were literally hitting places when it made no sense. They were hitting repair factories in Luhansk, and I was like, yeah, okay, bro, but everything you're hitting could maybe hold, 12, 13 units. Okay, there were a couple of storages, we're not going to deny it, but when you compare how much HIMARS was hitting all over Kherson last year, I counted within 3.5 months over 80 storages, and there were scenes of absolute carnage. While now the storm shadows are used for almost everything. They tapped the Chongar Bridge 4 times already, Sivash Bridge another 2 times. They have hit a couple of airfields in Crimea with dubious results. They have hit one depot, a legacy storage depot, the same cope that Ukrainians use now for the areas in Kelmensky and so on. The Russians are using, but oh yeah, it's old ammo. So the quality jump from HIMARS to Storm Shadow is there. The problem, the numbers are not there, and the targets are so far off that actually they're starting to become meaningless. And the other biggest issue is that Crimea has now a land bridge. So in order to stop that, paralyzing the railway traffic makes no sense. It literally makes no sense. It has, you will not go until the end like this. And that's why I think the Germans, or at least the Ministry of Defense, on top of the fact that they don't have that many towers active, are understanding the situation here. The situation is that, okay, we're going to give them 150. What they're going to do? They're going to hit 4 or 5 more bridges, or they're going to hit the Kerch Bridge. But we saw that the Kerch Bridge per se is not that much of a trouble, given the fact that the Sea of Azov allows the Russians to still put a lot of shit on the front, a lot more actually than if they use the bridge itself. The bridge is a PR victory. It will be also a logistical hindrance, but per se, it's a completely different ball game than Kherson. And also the escalation, I think that is going to follow up after the bridge getting hit properly, is not going to be of the liking of the Western partners. And one of the things that is happening right now, we have had at least 4 or 5 articles where they're literally saying, okay, the strikes in Crimea are nice and everything, but they're not actually affecting the situation at the front. And then the latest article was literally like, stop misusing allocated resources, focus on whatever you want to do. One of those things apparently is that the attacks on Moscow literally are going over in the fact that except for the 2 bombers that hit the Ministry of Digital Implementation in the city, all the rest seem to be an absolute trash. And the best results from these attacks within Russia have been done by people infiltrated there. The 225 M3 that was destroyed by an infiltrated DRG, probably actually not even a Ukrainian, but probably a Russian, shows that the Russians still are not in this war mode when they should have military zones around these air bases and a lot more control on who and why. All this logic so that these drone attacks are actually personally a distraction and also show impotence. Ukrainians are like, yeah, we can hit Moscow. Yes, you can break windows. It's all good, but then you get like calibrated, and then you are crying for God's sake, they are attacking our ports. Please give our F-16s because we cannot defend our airspace. So this whole logic, when it comes to the firebase, Ukrainians actually cannot sustain it properly, cannot manage it, because their whole logic in this war, when it was hyper-focused, like the defense of Kiev, trying to open up the ring around Kiev, benefited from a lot of Russian mistakes. In this case, Russians are making a lot less mistakes. So that firebase can also not count. Therefore, they are using HIMARS as counter-battery. I deny that. I think it's literally, they're using it as suppression assets. And then the Storm Shadows are not enough to do the task, to replace the HIMARS in the tasks that were there. But HIMARS itself is not in sufficient numbers. So what does it mean? It means that it cannot be used to sustain the fast pace of advance that they need to get to the first line. And their artillery, well, it's all nice and good, but the artillery literally either shoots and scoots, either dies. Why? Well, Lancet for starters, UMPKs, and also, as we saw with the mortar teams, the 3 Alakrans that are suspected being destroyed, even FPVs. Now, all this incapacity of the Ukrainian side to focus firepower on a point has a lot to do with the fact that once you concentrate this firepower and you open a path, guys need to follow through. And there is when the troubles start. I'm not going to describe you the fate of the 47th. We already mocked them enough. They are reduced now, instead of showing liberated places, to literally showing how they fucking save old babushkas and cats. They had sexual allegations against them. They got this dude who was the darling of Zelensky 3 days after getting demoted because he insulted the leadership of the brigade. We got proven losses that are over 50% of the forces at disposal. Then we get replacements sent to them, and these replacements also get burned. Like, it's an absolute shit show. And I think the 47th was like the 82nd actually, were the two PR brigades by a mile. The 33rd had the Leopards and all that shit, but the 47th, we got these Bradleys. Americans vaunted the Bradleys. I remember that shit when they say they can even hit tanks and they were going to be so much better than T-72s. I'm like, I'm not, honestly, bro. And then we see how the Bradleys are used, and they're not wrongly used. It's just they're not used as the Americans use them, because there's air supremacy, you get air power on tap, and so on and so on. So you got this Bradley literally trying to play fucking evacuation, getting hit by a mortar. It is immobilized, and then the Lancet start falling. And then when they say what they try to do with his evacuation with his Bradleys, they got fucking ammunition inside and wounded. So it's the perfect sarcophagus for whoever is inside. It's going to torch and burn nicely. But all this fucking image I'm just giving you is exactly why Ukraine is having huge issues. Logistical aspect is completely fucked up. They are forced to do with what they have. It's not their fault. I already said this. They were set up for failure with this Orbats, with this composition of brigades. The brigades do not have the necessary numbers. It's not a fucking brigade, guys. Stop calling it like that. Snakotron had this discussion with some idiots speaking about we have brigades. Just fucking compare a brigade combat team on the American side. In average, if you take a striker combat team, not even a fucking Abrams, a armored brigade combat team, just a striker, the intermediary force, which would be like a motorized brigade or regiment, called as you want in Soviet terms. You have over 312 strikers, plus ancillary equipment, plus organic logistical assets, in this case, most Humvees, some trucks, and whatever. That is 300 strikers with 11 people inside. It's 3,300 people this is your maneuver force. And sometimes you even had the striker with the striker FSV, so basically with the 105 millimeters. So you had also integrated organic firepower. It was shitty. They're mostly getting canned, but still you had this. So that made sense. Fast forward in Ukraine, these brigades, in average, even the 82nd, that is a heavy one, that is a fucking heavy one, is supposed to have 100. This is I was shocked. 100, exactly a fucking 100 armored fighting vehicles, plus 14 Challenger tanks. With this, even make it 110. 110 multiplied by, in average, 10 people for, let's say 11. You are over 1,180 something, plus the 14 Challengers at 4 people, you're going to be at less than 60. So in total, your maneuver force is less than 1,300 people. Your fucking striker brigade on the other side of the fucking ocean is at 3,300 minimum. The logistics on the striker brigade on the American side are about 1,000 people. The logistics on the fucking Ukrainian side, when you see what they're moving around with this 82nd, there are 180 people. It's not a brigade, it's a fucking reinforced battalion. And that's the first problem with the Ukrainian counter. The Orbat is shit. The assets given are shit. But this you know already if you're listening to me. And that's why they cannot sustain the fire base. And also look at the fuck they gave to the 82nd as a organic artillery arm. It's 105 millimeters L119, and it literally means that the outmost range these fucking guns can fire is gonna be 15 to 17 kilometers. But if they have to have a standoff range, they can also just not hit behind maximum 8 or 9 kilometers. So basically, the depth they offer this fucking brigade is literally explained what's going on. There are no guns enabling them to go further unless you call HIMARS or you start dipping in another brigade's organic assets like AS-90s or crabs or shit like that, which means that the fire base cannot be consolidated if you need to start swapping artillery assets from one brigade to the other. They did this mistake already with the 47 and 33rd. 47, as you might remember, was supposed to have Slovenian M55S tanks. Those were withdrawn because, of course, people not being idiots said if you send those souped up T-55s, they're going to burn and literally will have 4 guys KIA at the first mine. And instead of those, they had to dip in with tanks from the 33rd mostly, and then slowly some T-80s from capture or storage, and from the 67th were given to the 47th. And then the M55s went to 67th when they were immediately hit. But that's another story. But this intermingling, this interchanging of assets, this shouldn't be happening. That means that you completely miscalculated. And this adds to your problems with the fire base. So then we had the story about the clusters. Suddenly we're going to give Kasetka to Ukrainians. That's going to work so much better. And I was like, guys, it's not going to work so much better. What's going to happen is that it's going to shorten the range of these assets because the maximum range to fire Kasetka would be about 24 kilometers, which means that if you put them at 8 kilometers beyond the front, maximum you're going to be able to hit 16 kilometers beyond it. And the artillery that you're using to fire those Kasetkas cannot move forward because the areas when you are supposed to use them are not organically under the brigade you're processing them. So basically, when you see Kasetkas in Urozhanye, the assets that are firing those cluster ammunition are not from the units that are actually storming Urozhanye. They are forced to be given there so they can contribute. But this okay, you have, again, the same fucking problem of interchangeable firepower because at the base your planning was shit. Your whole idea is shit. And of course, we come back to what Mike Tyson said, everybody has a fucking plan until he gets hit in the face. And that's what happened. Now, the fire-based problem for Ukrainians led to something else. They were extremely good at tapping out Russian firing positions. I also made the fucking remark when you got these idiots fucking filming themselves with a fucking Malka, and they are in the same position 3 times along, I hope not the same day, but you can see that are using that position quite nicely. That means that if the Ukrainians are getting hit from there for a couple of times, they're going to fire up, and I'm not even talking about satellites and shit. I'm literally talking about a drone or 2 or 3 or 10, because that's also something else. You're going to fire up this drone, put a game Mars on hold. That drone's going to find out where exactly in one of the multiple positions this motherfucking Malka is, give the database to the coordination center or straight to the HIMARS. The data frame is going to open up. You're going to have coordinates. Guy's going to calculate the coordinates, not even calculate, just input them on the computer. Missile gone. There's a fat chance that the Malka is burned. And why does it happen? Because, as I told you, sometimes people are complacent. In this case, Ukrainians were extremely good the third, fourth, fifth week, even the second actually, when they literally took out a whole battery covering the flank at Blagodatne, going to Rozhanye, and that opened up for all the shit show we have seen in the Mokriali basin. But that thing is gone. Those losses are gone. If you see the last few weeks, we are at 9 artillery assets lost against 40, what happened before. So these things, it can be, of course, there are no more artillery assets, so the situation is dire, but that's not the case. Why? Because in Rozhanye, we saw Ukrainians come with a tank and 4 Huskies, try to invest a trench, and there was 24 dead. Most of the guys in the Huskies died. Tank got away. And Deep State said, oh yeah, thank you very much, guys, for sending our guys to die. 24 guys, 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers dead. And at least 6, we had them on tape next to the Husky. They had a mortar or whatever artillery rounds hitting them straight in the chin. Well, sweet dreams. And this is how the fuck does it work if the Ukrainians have completely suppressed Russian artillery? Well, that's the thing. They haven't. They are suppressing the most pregnant points and most problematic points for them that can see, but not everything that you think they can see. I'm sorry if it was completely unstructured what I said, but basically there are things that they can see because they have CBRs and shit like that, but there are also things they cannot see because sometimes the Russians are smart. Actually, Russians are often smart. The problem is that, unfortunately, one of the things they cannot do right now is basically pull the eyes out of the enemy. That, unfortunately, is untouchable for the moment. And they're going to have to work with that constraint up until they decide to fight this war. So, how if these artillery assets are destroyed 20 a day because you have these fucking numbers, then you get what happened in Rozhanye, you get what happens every time that they get a city in the Mokriyalu Valley, which is basically takes weeks. Neskuchne and Blagodatne took 2 days. It was done. There was a counterattack attempt by the Russians. It failed. They had lost 17 guys plus 1 tank, 2 BMPs. I'm not going to say it's all good. There was an attempt. But then to get to Staromaiorsk, 4 weeks. To get to Rozhanye completely, 2 weeks and 2 days. And then going on the flanks doesn't work. They're going to slowly get grind. But the thing is that they're not just losing assets because everybody's like, yeah, but the Russians are losing artillery. But that's the thing. Russians are in a position of defensive battle. So they're going to have to fire more. So they're going to be a lot more visible. You are advancing. You cannot advance by foot. And that's, we're going to go to Rabotino, to the thread I made yesterday, actually this morning, very, very early. You have to have assets to move forward, to go through and impress firepower on the positions that you want to take over. You all probably have seen this video of the Bradley attacking the post office in Robotino, and then something happens, missiles are launched, artillery starts raining, Bradley gets the fuck out, leaves the infantry in there, and probably those guys got countered by the Russians during the night. Just another joke. Moskal Teplovizor нет. We don't know what's going on. I thought the Ukrainians owned the night, but apparently it's not the case, etc., etc. So this whole situation with Ukrainians is that on one side, a lot of people have the right answer, like if you have air power, that thing is going away. No, actually, until July, Ukrainians were so fucking 100% sure that we're still being able to fly, and we have had at least 4 or 5 clips until July of JDAMs being sent. We are now the 23rd of August. There hasn't been a single JDAM clip since a month. As easy as that. Why? This might have to do with what I pointed out. There are 2 people dead in Ozerne, which is an Air Force base. in Ukraine, and that base has pilots only for Su-27 and Albatros L-39 listed, but it means nothing. Tarabalka was killed in the MiG-29, but he could fly 27, and he also had done his classes on a Su-24. So it means nothing once again. But who knows? Maybe one of those guys who was used to throw dams got an accident. Also, suddenly there is a decision to have the F-16s. Okay, they're gonna arrive very late, so it's not for now yet. But why? If Su-24s are untouchable, they can throw SS and scalps and maybe Taurus. Why? They can also throw dams, and in a sense, dam is even better because it's a far more kinetic bomb and you need it on the front. The reason is that, first of all, not enough airframes to do this, probably one or two shot down that we're going to learn later, as usual with Ukrainians. But also a lot less impact. They need to get a lot closer, they get a lot more attention. That's, I think, what happened with these two guys dead in Ozerne. They got too close. Some Sukhoi 35 saw them, hit them, they're dead. And of course, we don't know it because the Russian Ministry of Defense is a complete shit show when it comes to PR. They announce you 35 fucking planes that don't exist, but things that they do properly, they don't tell you until you learn them very late. So this whole situation is that Ukrainians cannot now rely on one of the assets that could have helped us, could have helped them actually, also us understand what is their plan with the Air Force. It's not there, and in Robotino it would be needed, so much needed, and I think they have tried something in Pokrovka. So we are advancing this counter, and we're seeing a lot of patterns here. First of all, whatever Ukrainians do, even when they earn something, it looks like shit. It has never been this bad. Last year, honestly, you had to be molding to what they were doing. Except for the small shitty video they made for Staromayorsk, which then was complete fiasco when the Russians saw the extent of the damages that had taken to get the fucking shitty town. The Kherson PR was wow, amazing. Kharkov PR, oh my god, I think most of us that are on pro-Z side were literally molding. Then there was the Duchani, Voskopila Duchani breakout. Honestly, that was also fucking amazing. That had done such a wonderful show. Now every single, I mean, even when they tried to go to Staromayorsk at the fucking city hall to raise the flag, they got head dropped. They lost the M113, and then they got the fuck out of there, went back to the cemetery, where they have this fucking Taras Shevchenko statue, whatever it is, and hoisted the flag there because they couldn't go to the city hall. I mean, how fucked up is everything right now? Even when they win, everything looks shitty. Even Rabotino, they probably, the video that I did with the babushkas was probably going to be part of the liberation video. They couldn't do it. And in fact, tomorrow they're going to have their fucking independence, irreducible, whatever you want to call it, day. And I think the point was to have Rabotino for the 24th. To announce that in Great Pomp, it would have been a nice PR. Right now, let's see what happens. It wouldn't matter at all for me because we're going to go to what exactly I wanted to say. So, basically, Ukrainians cannot manage the firebase. The Orbat is shit. A lot of things are not okay at all, but they're still advancing very slowly. It's a snail pace, even worse. They're having a lot of losses. Now we're going to go to the losses, and I'm going to explain you my view on the losses, why I think the losses are bad. By the way, they're not good on both sides. You need to like hold to something if you're pro-Russians, because I don't think you're going to like what I'm going to say right now. I'm going to start with the Russian side, because we still need to face the fact that despite the fact it's this abysmal failure right now, the damage capacity that was calculated and prepared for the counteroffensive was extremely good. And I think the first 3 weeks were extremely bloody for Russia. Why do I say this? I'm basing this on a site called Poternet. Poternet is basically no losses. It's a mockery done to a mantra that the Russians have used in the past for this kind of situations. And Poternet, since the 1st of June, I took the 1st of June. I shouldn't be doing that because, you know, the official start of the counter is not 1st of June, it's the 4th, but anyway. And you have about 4,988 losses verified. I'm going to tell you, unlike Mediazona, these losses are a lot more closer to reality. Why they are a lot more closer to reality? Because losses in the beginning of the war, there was a system that you need to put out, you need to go to cemeteries, all this shit. Now, the announcement on social media are recovering, in my opinion, and I had a discussion with a private group, people are probably going to recognize themselves, are a lot more sharp. In best case scenario, you're going to have 20% of the losses that are not, of the kills that are not found immediately. They're going to be found later on. But I do think that unlike what was happening last year, where it was extremely complicated to scurry through these contacts, now it's easier. Why? I'm going to explain myself. Once you see a guy dead on VK, Facebook, whatever, you are going to list his friends. And more than often, unfortunately, Russians are not very OPSEC and InfoSec friendly, which means that every guy from the unit the guy was in is going to start wishing Vishnu Pamyat and so on, which means that you're going to have almost a whole fucking Orbat. And this is very dangerous. I wanted to make a post about it before, Kuluf went. But so now Mediazona has a lot better database, but these guys have a lot better database. So instead of trying to watch out who is dead and scurrying a lot, no, what they do is literally put the linkage with, let's say, Sasha Ziger just died, and you get Vasily Ziger, Ivan Ziger, and some who are in the same unit because pictures are all together. Now, very easily, you can see if this guy start dying, first of all, the same unit is getting pounded, but you know also that you are going to see it immediately. It's not like before when you didn't know who was what, and you need to literally hack massive databases. Now, the derivation is pretty simple. That's why I'm saying that instead of having this 40% of unknowns, you have actually a lot less, because you can filter better and you can also directly see, okay, what are the news. And trust me, it's not that easy. Sites like Poternet, Mediazone, and so on are not a couple of guys in a fucking office. The treatment of information, the added information, when you compare it to how complicated it is for the project like Lost Armor, where about 35 to 40 guys finding officers, dead Ukrainian officers. Sometimes they add officers I know that were killed because of other sources. They add it like 4 days later. We had this discussion before when my own list, or the list when I was part of, actually it wasn't mine. I'm not going to start lying. We were like 200 officers in advance because either we suspected, either we knew your unit was caught under fire. There were social media posts, which could have been rumors, of course. And then suddenly, couple of days later, we see that these guys are dead. And Lost Armor still not added because they wanted a multiple verification source. So what I want to say with this now, I'm saying that the losses from Poternet right now are a lot more closer to reality, and you can see it on the way it's going up. Losses are also far more reactive, so you're going to have maybe 80, as I said, at least 80% of the losses are going to be real. Let's go back to what I said, why I'm saying all this, because on Poternet, the losses from the 1st June to today, 23rd of August, are about 4,988. Out of those are losses that were added from previous months, so that have nothing to do with the counter itself. There were about 243 losses that have nothing to do with the counter. This means that the total number of known losses is about 4,000. Not about, it's 4,000, according to Puterian, 4,700 and 40 something. This means that if we add my threshold, you have to add at least 1,000 KAE that we're gonna get found later on for this period. So you're about at 6,000, 5,800 something. These are Russian losses in the time span of almost 3 months, and with most of them being literally in the first month. In June, it was a rather big bloodbath. I reviewed my first number from Preternet. You could find like 2018, but if you check it properly with what was added in August as well, if you check the data, it's about 2,300 something that were lost in June. And then the 1.5 next months later, you can see that the augmentation doesn't follow up, it goes down. And the cluster ammunition was supposed to be a killer for the Russian troops, but actually it has not been a dud. Let's not lie about it, but it only works when the Russians are exposed, so basically either counterattacking, either attacking. Russians have been doing very little attack on the areas of concern for the counter, so Donetsk and Zaporozhye. They've done a lot more in Kupiansk, but ironically, they're advancing in Kupiansk despite clusters, despite FPVs and all this shit. Why? It's very simple. There are less bodies there, a lot more open space, and the Russians have had the time to actually see what's going on. And this is lasting for a while now. It's not something new. The reversal up north is not something new. Ukrainians were afraid of it, and it's happening. But it's still a creeping offensive. It's mostly a to counterbalance whatever losses they're going to have in the south. So I wouldn't, start celebrating it. But then we move back to the Russian losses. If you are about 5,800, and we know that the Kia-WIA ratio is about 2.21, let's say 2.30, but I still maintain the 2.21 because that's how the Russian units are still fighting. We are around, 18K casualties in almost 3 months. Is huge, and it regards the whole front. It's not just the counter. If you separate it, divide it with what you said, so if half of the losses are in Zaporozhye, then you can see it's a huge increase in losses. You can see that basically 9,000, 10,000 people have been killed or wounded in Zaporozhye, and it's a small front of 194 kilometers. If, of course, my estimates of the force share is real, which I believe so, because we can see that most of Ukrainian losses, about 50% of the losses that were seen by Oryx during that time lapse are in the area of Zaporozhye and southern Donetsk area. So Verminsky Ledge, Orikhiv axis, Kamyansk, and then some shit in Kherson, which I think still is a distraction and a fixating maneuver, but people are like, yeah, there are going to be pontoons over there and shit like that. Hilarity ensues. So that's the losses for the Russian front, I estimate, and supported by actual data. We are about 18,000 casualties in 2 months and a half, or 2 months and 3 weeks along the whole front. And then we go to Ukrainians. How do I actually calculate the Ukrainians? First of all, I had a discussion today, again in the group. I was being very silly. And if Trapped Iron is here, he's going to understand what I'm saying, is that I was considering the degree of posthumous awards for Ukrainians with the ratio of the killed officers that we know, for instance, and then started to see the correlation. So basically what happened is that in average there are about 115 officer killed per month on the Ukrainian side. Until now, they have lost about 300 officers. Until the end of August, they're going to be probably be around 330, 340. And so all these officers killed right now would have needed posthumous awards. But when you can see the posthumous awards per month, especially 2 last months, do not respect the killed officer number. You got like either half, sometimes a bit less than half. So the logic, if you have been in the military, is that the posthumous awards are going to be either very high or very low. So officers are going to take them earlier. Let's say a pilot dies, he's going to get his posthumous awards. Most is going to be a fast forward situation, especially for pilots and shit like that, because they are flying ace and they need that awards. This was a mistake of mine. I shouldn't have gone for awards. Well, I should have gone to see how many real losses were there. Was for the application for awards. There are petitions on the office of the president of Ukraine who literally say, my son is dead in this date. I would like him to have an application, to introduce an application for award for courage, posthumous for merit, whatever. And this thing was so stupid to me. It was right there. You could see what this guy was, what military unit was, when he died, and you discover a completely different universe when it's not complete, but it already exceeds the posthumous awards that were given per month, because unless they're, of course, the family lies, but the family cannot lie, because as you know, in Ukraine right now, the economical situation is all great, and losing your son, which sometimes is also a provider for the family, means that you are losing a extremely huge chunk of income. And if the son has children, has a wife, that means that the wife also has less income. So the applications for awards can be, fraudulent, for sure. But most of the times they're real. And not most of the times, but like 98% of the times. Sometimes people say, oh, my son died like defending heroically Bahmut, and he had already had an order of courage, but I would like an order of fatherland, all that bullshit. Why? Because, of course, you get an extra dip of compensation. So in this case, the funny part is that the losses were there, actually. We just need to open our eyes. And Lost Armor literally started to weed through these requests. And then is how sometimes they also confirm that officers are dead. So when we check to these awards and to the requests and so on, we are 3,700 awarded or requests for awards of personnel that are above rank and file. So we start from senior sergeant.
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
Upstairs. If we respect the technical order, that's the first layer, by the way, because there's another second layer, far more mundane and probably not that right, but still. If we respect the technical order, that means that you should at least double, because on top of losing your hierarchy, you are also going to lose normal soldiers. So we're at 3.7, 3.6, whatever. So if you double it, technically, you should be at about 7.2. How I corroborate this? I corroborate this with the fact that we all know, no, actually you don't know, but I know that the amount of officers per 1,000 soldiers in the Ukrainian army is about 54, probably less now because of the hybridization. The NCOs have been taking a lot of tasks from the normal officer course, and also it's very complicated to push officers to the line of duty while under war. This means that troops inside, which means that you would be looking at, if those were full, about 3,000 people affected. Those 3,000 people didn't all die. I'm not saying they're all dead or whatever. However, we also saw what Bober did. We have seen artillery strikes on. But so if half of the people that would be on those tanks were affected, basically killed, even 1/3 doesn't matter, and you add the effects of artillery, on Zaporizhia alone, you would have at least 2,000 to 3,000 killed, at least. When you refer to where the officers were dead based on the lost armor list, you see that most of the officers killed are in two spots. The balance is about 1/3, 2/3 of this mass, not of the total. And most of the officers killed are up north, Sumy, Kupiansk, or in Zaporizhia. And you have about 130 officers killed in Zaporizhia. Only 3 of them are pilots. So the thing in Ozerna, we don't know what the fuck is going on, but we need to have details. So 127 per 20, you are 2,400. And Zaporizhia, with the losses explained by Oryx, was still at 45%, in equipment 50%. So whatever you are turning this, for sure, we are at between 5,000 and 7,200 killed. Where the problems start for the Ukrainian side is that they have a far larger casualty number, because unlike the Russians have very few VIA. It could be good in this case because the projected losses are reduced, so the total casualty count is reduced, but it also means that you mostly have killed people. Because as I projected in May, and then it was discovered by Mediazona through their own estimates and data, it's about 220 casualties wounded for 1 Russian dead. Interestingly enough, the ratio is not very far from the Ukrainian side. It's 261. So it means that if you're losing 5 KIA, in the best case scenario, you're going to have for the whole front 30,000 wounded. So you're at 18,000. If you have 7.2, you're going to have for the whole front almost 25,000 casualties. So if we have to put this counter force, plus we add 3 or 4 brigades as tier of support, because it's going to shit. Well, most of the counter force is being slaughtered right now, and that's why they cannot advance. The losses are not too far from each other, and I always said this, Russians need to understand there is no mythical 3-1. Despite artillery, despite what you want, the losses are very close because unfortunately Russians have been attacking for most of the war and have been doing stupid shit. But Ukrainians have not been better either, and the recent attacks have been an absolute shit show. An absolute shit show. I see that Mishka left. It's funny. By the way, guys, if you don't know, Mishka was a former pro-Russian, turned 100% Ukrainian now, and who was basically saying that the summer would be hot. And it is. Unfortunately for him, the bridge is still there. Russians are still in Zaporizhia. Anyway, but I want him because he's probably going to rehear the record. So basically what we're having right here is that a very close number of attrition. This still favors the Russians because they don't have to move. The Ukrainians are still the ones suffering more casualties that they need to treat and put back into action as soon as possible because of the following thing. As I told you, we had made this couple of estimates, and the Americans gave a number, 63,000 in 13 months. All good. You divide it, you are about 5,000 people per month for. Everybody back then said, yeah, but you know, they started formation very iffy in the beginning. Okay, no problem. Let's put it at 10,000 per month, no problem. They are able to form 10,000 people per month. In 2 months and 3 weeks, if the estimates are correct, of course, they have about 20,000 casualties. So even if you form 10,000 per month, you're losing the 2/3. You're going to lose 2/3, so your staying power is still going to be 3 months, as we calculated last time. But if it's closer to reality, as I said, so in average you're forming 5,000 to 6,000 people, then you don't have staying power after 2 months. Because you lose 20 casualties. Okay, not all casualties are like irrecoverable, so that's something else that needs to be calculated. But still, you are losing people even for half an hour out of the front. Half an hour there is a gun less. Half an hour there is a driver less. Half an hour there is an artilleryman less, and so on and so on. You are losing these people at a rate that right now you cannot reinforce. And there, is going to speak about this. You had this whole shenanigans about firing the military commissars responsible for the enlistment and the selection of people. Of course, there was a lot of corruption. Of course, there was a lot of money changing hands and so on. It's logical. Who would not pay to get away from conscription? Who would not pay to be shielded from bodily harm and get demuscalized? I mean, I'm pretty sure even I'm not going to lie to you, given the level of absolute madness this war is going to, especially with FPV drones. I'm not that sure anymore that I would be all big ballsy like I'm behind the microphone. So this whole point is that now Ukraine is not empty. It's not like they don't have troops quite at all. It's not at the point. As I said, on the front line, they have 150,000. They have probably like the same amount on the rear, doing jack squat, R&R, being wounded, but expected to be called back to the front, secondary roles, and so on and so on and so on. So the potential for them to throw meat on the wall is not gone. Quite the contrary. For this operation, at least, they have 50 days, around 50 days until mid-October. But the phase where they were supposed to literally roll over the Russians, which was 45 days, was a huge fuck up. We saw it that after 45 days, they tried to put another layer. So around the 26th of July, we had this bombastic announcement that the next phase was supposed to happen, and within 1 to 3 weeks, they were supposed to arrive in Melitopol. You might remember that article. I can also post it back again. Hilarious shit. We are way past those 3 weeks, and they are a bit closer to Melitopol, but yeah, inches. So let's run the whole sheet. Why is this very, very much important? It is of grand importance because when I was seeing the film from Bober yesterday, and thanks to Draja, bro, great thing. He was here, but he went. He geolocated at least 6 strikes, and along to those 6 strikes, we found out I personally, I don't know if other people will say, they're really literally on the line. So what's going on is that they are supplying 2 positions, one going to Verbove, the other trying to get to Robotino. And those positions have literally interlinked trenches, inside roads, and they're dropping lots of infantry. Okay, what's a lot? In this case, probably around a company, 90. And that company doesn't serve a purpose to attack. It serves a purpose to advance, recon, get hit by artillery, call artillery on them. And then once that artillery is not working anymore, they keep moving on. They have decided to make it an infantry fight, a bit like the Azerbaijanis did that, or the Azeris did that in Karabakh. The difference is that in Karabakh, the Azeris could count on drones upstairs and suicide drones. In this case, it's completely the opposite. So they're literally doing everything wrong in this case, but they don't have the choice as well. They don't have air cover. They can all use their own FPVs, but they need to start from way behind. So basically, on the contact line, it's all fine and good, but they find themselves into a beaten zone where the FPVs are not going to reach the Russian artillery, but they're also not going to reach the Russian FPVs because the Russian FPVs are hitting the line. So unless they have their FPVs of their own, and then someone is trying to stalk Russian FPV teams, which is also possible because we already heard that they have tried to target Rusic, and Bobr at the first few days almost got hit with the FPV almost going to a defensive position of them. So all this is very, 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 very difficult for Ukraine, but they don't also have much choice. The other choice they would have is just like to start doing what the Russians did last year in Luganda, in Luhansk, which is a rolling fire, a barrier of steel, but Ukrainians do not have the guns for those. If you see how much guns they received and how much they can pack in that area, they would need at least 300 guns. But 300 guns put 10 to 15 kilometers back in order to beat the zone beyond it means also that Lancets are going to start raining. And so long, what they've done is like literally they didn't advance by huge artillery. What they did is like bring whatever artillery they had, hit a couple of times, go back, and do not allow the Russians to know from their firing. But this is once time consuming. And the second aspect is that once your artillery goes away, then it's their artillery's turn to fuck you up. And that's what happened in Urozhanye with his attack along the tree line and then going to the Okop. There was no Ukrainian artillery to silence the Russian ones, and it costed about 20 dead, 4 vehicles, 5 actually in the plan, but one was destroyed before, 4 vehicles down, and then utter failure of the attack. So the whole idea that Ukrainians can put sustained fire bases, once again, is not being supported by what we're seeing on the ground, be that by the time spent in the advance, or be that by the results obtained by the attempted advances. One of the biggest problems that we have in this situation, as I said, is that despite all these failures, the Ukrainians are still going out there, and the plan that I've chosen is very, as I said, reminiscent to what they did in Kherson, which is basically starting to slowly creep infantry, and then at some point push with that same infantry. When finally a vehicle makes it, push to the next position, overwhelm it, and then you have a gap in the first Russian defensive line. This, of course, would have required a lot more men than what we saw. It's not 90 people. It's not with a company going to do that. You will need to slowly, fill up all these trenches with people, and that would require a lot of activity on the supply side, but also a lot of activity in the organization side. And you can see what happens. Bobr was literally picking up lonely pickups, 3-4 guys by foot that were, actually, that's the funny thing. They were picking these smaller units because they were respecting a dispersion mode. So you got small groups moving on along this line to recon the line, and they would get hit by Bobr. Honestly, it was a very nice idea, and Bobr is literally understanding what's going on. Of course, it's not only Bobr, it's the Russian high command, but they are literally stopping these things from happening. I don't know how successful it's going to be in the long term, because one of the biggest issues that we have right now is that if they're still there, when you see the positions, they have descended about 150 meters. So the creep is ongoing. It's going to go like this forever. If you're going to try to envelope Rabotino within 4 weeks, only with infantry, fucking be my guest, because at some point the infantry is going to go out. You're going to have to form assault units, form 8 to 12 people, and Bobr will be there with another FPV. This is also the other problem that Ukrainians have right now. They need to offer fire support to these guys. They're not able to because ATGM, because Lancet, with whatever you want. And at the same time, they don't dare offering continuous fire support with artillery because, again, UMPKs, Lancets, Krasnopols, whatever you want. So this Gordian knot, at least in Zaporizhzhia for the moment, especially in Rabotino, is going to be how much Ukrainians are willing to suffer in KIA for the area to get it. Because once again, even when you're going to get Rabotino, the actual fortifications are behind Rabotino, like about 800 meters. So we need to try to invest those. And the only way is, of course, to envelop the fortification, but you haven't secured your basically western flank on the Ukrainian side, and so it's the Russian eastern flank. If you haven't secured that, you are going to just be subjected to more massacre. Okay, now the K-52s were too close, but so that's a problem. But FPV is going to be there, and they're a lot more detectable, and they are a lot more flexible in what they want to do. As you could see, they can need tanks, can need BMPs, can need vehicles, can need infantry, can need trenches. What's not to like? And if it's real that they're going to start having a basic recognition soon, you're going to have also a very huge problem, because if that works within 500 meters, it means that it can literally send it flying. The matrix is going to recognize at any kind of target, and then a lot of the target selection that Bobber was doing, so basically could see they were flying around to see where exactly were the infantry. If it's a movement detection system, then you're fucked. And of course, it's true for both sides, but in this case, Ukrainians are attacking, so they are the guys exposed. So, yeah, in general, the situation, given the depth, given how it is, it's very complicated for Ukraine. Russians are in a good spot, but still, it's not done yet. There's a lot of time, a lot of meat, a lot of danger as well. And also, one of the things I'm not seeing is like, and Snektachon is going to talk about it later, I'm pretty sure about, is that I don't see any hurry for any of the European partners to offer more. Yeah, of course, Americans send like some extra Bradleys and Strikers, but we are at suspected 4 Strikers down already, and those haven't been like seen in attack. And the few Bradleys that we saw, like the one in Robotino, you can see the Ukrainians are not absolutely confident of what they're doing, because at the first counter of the Bradley, the first explosion next to it, they literally haul ass. So this is also a problem. You are supposed to have this Wunderwaffe from Pindostan, but the first thing you're doing is you're hauling ass because you're treating it like a BMP. So either you literally know something that Pindos is not saying, and I know what it is, that Bradley, even with the brusque kit and whatever you want to call it, is still extremely sensitive to detonations, especially because one of its biggest problem is that the ATGMs are on an external compartment next to the turret. So an explosion there most of the time is going to dislodge slightly the turret and make the turret useless, because you're gonna have problems rotating and stabilizing it. Also, the tracks are also problematic. Once they are down, they are down. And the Bradley, it's not a BMP, it's not a 16-ton vehicle, it's a 33-ton vehicle. So suddenly it becomes really a target practice. And again and again and again and again, I think that whatever is being said, Ukrainians have had a punch in the chin, and morally they are really suffering from it. I'm not going to say whatever military careers from Russia are saying, they're completely despaired and shit like that. No, I don't think it's like that. But they're seeing that whatever they're getting is not enough. Whatever they're getting is not making a difference. I think the clusters especially are having a huge down here. They were supposed to kill Russians in huger numbers. Since they came, we can see that on the whole front, the verified losses are not larger. And also, there were supposed to be used, there where the Russians are advancing, they're not. They're not being used in Kupiansk. We're not seeing them attacking people in Kupiansk. Actually, there's literally a black cloud by both sides to what's going on in Kupiansk. I myself was fooled by a video supposedly for Sinkovka. It wasn't the case. And I'm openly apologizing about that. I for the first time, I was so happy by the situation that they were starting bombing bridges in Kupiansk, which is also a prelude for cutting the forces in there and getting the city, that I switched my brain off and I didn't wait for a confirmation, geolocation, call it whatever you want. But for the Ukrainians, now the clusters are being used literally as a RAM, and it's still not working. So the reality overall is going to be the same. This battle, especially around Rabotine, so in the Kyiv axis, is going to be decided by infantry on the Ukrainian side. Unfortunately, there is no other way. Until they figure out the fire base situation, so until they have positions that were literally could sit with their artillery guns and rain fire, that would mean that they would have to advance until Nova Pokrovka, because it will be too far. And then they can bring more the guns closer and support them through the line. But right now, and this is what the Russians also wanted to do, because they are not too deep in Robotinos, basically are not even 6 kilometers deep, the artillery on the back cannot come closer. Because the Russians can play that fucking roulette. They can send Lancets, they can send the Krasnopol M. It's not a problem. The Russians can take those risks, and they have taken them, given that they have lost at least prima facie more artillery assets in the Zaporizhia area. So until that situation evolves, until that the Ukrainians can actually put their artillery to good use and have a sustained rate, it's not going to work. The other solution is, as I said, use the HIMARS as an artillery asset. That means that using way too much ammunition, way too many missiles that they don't have, they need to wait for them. And then, only then, they are going to at least have a modicum of success, which, of course, we be on Ziegler's side, we don't wish them. Now, one last point, and this is the main threat actually to the line, is the Verminsky Ledge. There, as you could see, even despite everything that Ukrainians say, the losses are almost 50-50. I'd say 60-40 for the Russian side. And the situation is the following. Khodakovsky loves talking shit. He's a bit of a Moors, but that needs... Moors is a nobody, so it doesn't matter. But Khodakovsky keeps with his ideas that are poisonous. Even Girkin was not like that. At least Girkin was straight up dooming and not being nice and shit. He said like everything is bad, blah, 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 we're going to lose, and he ended up in jail. But Khodakovsky starts with, we are pushing the enemy, this and that, and then 2 days later, we have to admit we cannot beat the Ukrainian military. I'm like, excuse me, bitch? I'm sorry, I'm cursing. It makes no sense to what you're saying. Unless you are going to deny that they are having, even if we want, I'm going to make this a small digression again. Let's take the numbers that were given by the Americans recently. 200,000 Ukrainians casualties, about 300,000 Russian casualties. 70,000 Ukrainians killed, 120,000 Russian killed. Even if we take those numbers, it means that the impact on the Ukrainian organization of 70,000 killed, based on the ratio that we said, that we're going to have 20 soldiers for one commanding officer as a whole. And that means that there are at least 1,000 officers we don't know of. And it's possible because we got 19,000 missing in action of military age. And so probably there are like 1,000 officers in there. That means that the structure, the active structure, active forces structure of the Ukrainian army pre-war is gone, is literally gone, because there were about 7,000 of them. That was people who are going to put guys on the ground and sending them off to fight. Half of them is dead, and all kind of replacements going to put in there, are not going to be at the same level. It's a completely different aspect. So unless you have replaced those, that means that you would have replaced 70 KIAs as well, because otherwise the army would be crumbling. That means that your actual effort to sustain the front for the rotation would be what many people have said already. They lost already the first army, they are the second army. So it's pretty logical that their mobilization force would be about 300,000 to 400,000 maximum. And one of the leaflets that we saw, remember, guys from Zhytomyr, he had the call number on his paper. It was 300,000 something. That was in December last year. Fast forward, we knew that they had this very speedy process because they were in dire straits last year, especially until like July. This means that indeed the maximum they could have mobilized until now, given the preparation process and everything, would be about 500,000 people. So the whole, if we extract these casualties, because that's the funny thing, we know that they get between 20 and 50,000 amputees from a certain article I will not cite. Even if we take the worst case scenario, amputees and MAAs, that 110,000 people not coming back. Amputees 20,000, 70,000 dead, plus the missing 19,000. Those guys are not back. They are dead, POWs, whatever, they're not back. So you have 110,000 of irrecoverables, right? Okay. If you put it at 50,000 amputees, then you are looking at 150,000 irrecoverables. So literally, the army at 22/02/2022 is gone. For all purposes, it's gone. They already lost that army. So whatever they have now is lacking. Maybe not motivation, although a lot of guys say the new guys, especially this year, they're like pull there. The motivated guys, 80% are gone, and so on and so on and so on. So this whole situation leads us, again, as I said, that the Ukrainians do not have the staying power on long term. So the only decision that's going to be made is that how long are they going to ram this wall, to what purpose as well? Because, okay, you're going to break out to the first line. You just got no Pokrivka, and you are trying to cross that line. Add another minus 2,000 or 3,000, add another month or two, and what happens? What happens is that you are in December, you have probably used at least 1,000 out of the 1,600 vehicles and assets you were given for the counter. America is going to deliver you another 150 assets, and you are exactly 16 kilometers from the line of start. And the fire base that you're going to start installing is to push infantry through and assets through. But your assets now are gone. So this is one of the things that happened to the Russians last year. The advance in Lugansk was good, no problem, but the losses for that advance were not compatible with a sustainable rhythm. I'm not going to speak about the crossing in Maine, Bilorivka, sorry. That was a fuck up, and we have a discussion that Lapin appears, a third of your BTG infantry power disappears. Like, hide your BTGs if Lapin is near. So that's the thing. Ukraine right now is in front of a dilemma, and honestly, it's very simple. If this was a political exercise, so put themselves in a better situation, negotiate, it's all good. But what we're seeing right here is not so far the case, because they now are taking so hard risks, which, and I'm going to tell you something. Recently, we got this article that Ukrainians were adamant not to lose manpower. But the tactics they're using are literally using up manpower. So I don't know who is lying in this case. I personally have a feeling that, in fact, there is a scapegoating going on, that the Westerns are trying to pull at least a little bit the rug out of Zelensky, saying, oh, we're sacrificing our men, you don't give us enough firepower. But in fact, the firepower was there. It's just that apparently, according to Americans, the wargaming was they would lose about 15 to 20% the first push, but it will be already in Tokmak. And I need to say, it's true. If there was an applied pressure from 4, 5, 6 brigades with accepting bigger losses that they incurred, probably Tokmak would be in sight. I'm not saying it was a done deal, but that's what I thought. It was like, if these guys apply about 100 tanks and 300 to 400 armored fighting vehicles on specific directions, they're going to open up the front, and probably the Russians are going to panic. Instead of that, the only fucking battalion level attack that was done, I posted you this picture, and everybody laughed, and they literally pushed half a battalion on one single road with Toyotas and shit, and got lit up by helicopters, artillery, tanks, whatever. So the only attempt they did was a shit show, and all the attacks after that were also even worse shit shows, although they went a lot further. So that situation is that Ukrainians refuse to take those losses initially, but they're not refusing to take losses on the deep end. And I think that the real problem is that now the Westerns are like, guys, you're literally smoking this asset like it was crack. We cannot deliver you, or at least we will not deliver you as much as you want, because, let's say, for the Bradleys, about 200 have been probably delivered or pledged. It's not a huge number, overtly, but if you see the way of which these losses are going, I'm sorry, but they're going to need 500 to sustain the wear and tear, the losses, the destruction. And 500, you are coming close to 10% of whatever is available in storage and in the active forces. Same for strikers. If you start losing them at Bradleys and you would need 300 to 400, you're going back to 10% of these forces. And these strikers, people can say whatever they want, they are still within active units. Some specialized vehicles, 2 of them were lost. The squad engineering vehicles. Sorry, bro, those are niche assets. You're not losing the bog standard V bottom striker. You're literally losing something special. And God forbid they give them the new Bradley with the 30 millimeter turret. Is going to be even a bigger shit show. So in the whole right now, what I'm feeling is that the Ukrainians maybe want more assets, but at the same time they feel pressured because they're losing them too hard. And in the case of Leopard, even Oryx has 15 of them, and that's a fourth to what was supposedly delivered. Then what is coming, especially Leopard ones, God forbid, those things are going to be even worse than the M55Ss, So this whole situation feels more and more like there was an attempt. This attempt ended as it was. And by the way, I need to tell you something. I mocked the Americans, and it's probably true that the Department of State was showing hubris, but the CIA wargamed it, and it was part of the leaks, and had very little optimism on these things succeeding until the end. They said that the gain is going to be modest, it's going to be probably a political cudgel for Zelensky to use against Putin. But so far, the CIA was right. Okay, we might not lie them, but in this case, they were right. And I honestly was even more alarmist at what they had described, because they basically said that Tokmak would be the end game of the offensive or counteroffensive. And in this case, it's exactly what's going on. Tokmak seems to be, if things go properly, Tokmak on one side, and I think Pokrovka on the other side, in Vremensky, they seem to be the only attainable objectives right now. Now, is this going to happen? That's something different. I'm not gonna, discuss it. It's not my point here. My point is just, as I said, what's happening around in Rabotino, and probably, I don't even know, maybe Rabotino is falling right now. I'm not following up. I'm just saying that what happened now in Rabotino shows two things: that there is a huge disparity on what people banked in the beginning, what people understood after the first punch in the mouth, and what people want to do after all these days and months. Losses are high. Attrition level is high for such a short front. And also the biggest problem that we're having right here is that there is no proper solution. And on the Russian side, it's also pretty bad. I mean, not going to lie, Russia needs three things right now. That's in my opinion, the most pressing matter. They need a solution for a persistent ESR and direct contact, because I think that's how they would have probably stopped the Western attack on Urozhanye. Okay, the river slowed them down and they defended the town for a while, but the fact that they have a complete flank open, they can see Ukrainians coming down from Staromayorsk, and nothing is being done in terms of direct contact. And I'm not saying helicopters, I'm literally saying it doesn't matter if you're going to use your fucking Orion. It doesn't matter if that shit can fire 4 missiles, take out 3-4 tanks. It's that many assets less, and you don't need to count on Ukrainians being idiots and fucking drowning T-72s near Makarovka. So once again, I mean, these problems, it doesn't matter what you lose in this case. The Russians are still too loss adverse, and this, in my opinion, is not a good sign. On the other side, the situation in the communication front is horrible. For instance, for Robotine, the only real source that we have on Russian side is Russich Nakarzel Spetsnaz. That's it. That's it. There is nothing else. If you want to hear Romanov in the 11th of August was said Robotine is done. Rybar saying the 14th and the 15th Robotine is done. And then when we have geolocated footage, we find out that not only it's not done, but except for the advance in the center from the Bradley, all other approaches to it from the 17th to 21st, the Ukrainians went back, including with losses. And even the footage from the Bradley, you could see Ukrainians were literally licking their wounds when the Bradley came through. So the information front, and I said this, needs to be changed. I don't care if you don't want to sow panic, but you have to tell the people, first of all, about the losses. You don't need to be 100% truthful. You don't need to explain them that, oh my God, you lost like 30 guys because some idiot fucked up the planning. But you need to give numbers at some point, because I think the The Russians are unfortunately seeing a lot of what's going on, and Ukrainians are banking so much on PR and so much on gore. I cannot open my YouTube without seeing Ukrainians PRing the bombing of two lone guys in the middle of nowhere, and there is not even a kill. Where is that from the Russian side? In order to see that, you literally need us to open obscure Indonesian fucking channels on YouTube, or then start OpenTG. But almost nobody in the West, except people who are following this war, have Telegram or use it for this purpose. Most of them are working with it. So that PR situation on the Russian side is pretty bad. And actually, it's not too bad generally because we got a lot of footage, but for fuck's sake, showing last year in April footage and passing it as Rabotino or Vrebovka this year, and not by a small channel. It's literally two majors. Of course, footage was good, and now I know how the fuck the Russians did to stop the advance in April towards from Kisilyovka towards Singurevka, but that footage should have been out there last year. From that attack or that situation, last year we had only 5 BTRs burned by Russian helicopters, and that was it. That's how bad the PR is on the Russian side. It's probably the worst I've seen, and we find out all these gems multiple times. The SSO video, when we saw that literally blowing up shit in Nikopol, the Iskander on a Ukrainian mechanized platoon, we saw that in February last year, and it dated March or February 2022. So, I mean, it's a huge problem, the PR side. It's the second pillar of the Russian incapacity of showing, of bending a part of the public opinion on the West, on saying, okay, guys, maybe you think we're losing, but actually the Ukrainians are paying a price that they cannot sustain until the end, even if you arm them, because they are losing people. And you need people in those tanks, in those APCs. And then the third point, and this is the biggest issue, but is being solved, as I said, is that right now Russia is having this peak drone situation when, if Russia had the assets it has today, last year in February, a lot of things would have been completely different. Of course, with ifs, my aunt will be my uncle, etc., etc. We know that aspect. And also would have been another adaptation from the Ukrainian side, and the Americans maybe a straight up intervention, because it is, I mean, if Russia was too hard on Ukraine, I don't think Americans would have allowed Kyiv to fall. And then we would have probably had a harder conflict with other types of circumstances and consequences. So once we are in this logic where the Russians are indeed coming back to the drone game, to the standoff munition games and so on, and they are very far from what Americans can deliver, by the way, but still they're just leveling the ground. And I said from the beginning of this war, the only situation that the Russians needs to be is to be close enough to cause the damage that they were supposed to be causing as the bigger guy in this fight. And then you're going to see Ukrainian advances slow down, and you're going to see Ukrainian morale dip down, and you're going to see Ukrainian effectiveness go down. And what better example of the complete lack of effectiveness of the Ukrainian tactics and fighting spirit, quote unquote, than Robotyne. There you can see everything that an army that is LARPing at something it is not, every mistake they can do. And Russians were there first, by the way, so don't take me wrong. Lack of cover, extremely bad logistics, intentional choice to play by the numbers. So basically, okay, we're going to send 10 guys because we're going to lose 2 or 3 or 4. So at least 6 going to make it to the trench. all these practices are not because it's Soviet mentality or Slavic mentality. No, it's because there is no other way, guys. It's no other way. The assets that the Ukrainians need to apply whatever they've learned with the Western clique are not there. And also, they're not fighting goat herders. And that's it. That's it. That's basically it. And we are almost on the 80th day. Tomorrow is, I think, Ukrainian national holiday. And I hope Rabotino holds. I don't want the pure victory. If he doesn't, he doesn't. I mean, it's part of this war, part of this movement. But I don't want the pure victory tomorrow for Zelikoka. And the other problem that we're seeing is that, and this is the last thing I want to say, the last 3 polls from both the Kiev Institute of Sociology and multiple think tanks, most of them, of course, funded by the US, show that Ukrainians are not ready to compromise on territorial integrity. This, in my opinion, runs afoul of what the soldiers on trench lines are thinking. And we've had already a couple of snippets from what the soldiers think. First of all, there was the Ukrainian sniper saying that we are ready to just, like, if the line is what it is right now, we're ready to call it quits for as long as we can stay a viable state. Then you had these 3 guys discussing about the fact that they come in R&R, and people say, yeah, but, you know, Russians don't have all this. And then the guys say, oh, whoa, they have all this shit, guys. And said, yeah, but it doesn't matter. They're idiots. They don't know how to use it. And then the guy said, how the fuck do you think half of my platoon is gone? Like, I think, unfortunately, a lot of copium and a lot of bombastic propaganda has turned this situation right now into Russian failures, by the way. That also needs to be said. We're not going to become cop lords here. But this mixture has turned this war into something of 2 speeds. There is now officially a two-speed situation where people who are most affected going to the front, having their close ones at the front dying, being wounded, coming back, shell-shocked, saying shit, and people who are not part of that, who are literally yapping about bullshit. And part of it is also the political and economical class in Ukraine. And when you hear Dalinov calling Russians Asians, when you hear Podolyak saying that they're going to do this and that, when you have Budanov literally saying that, oh, we must have a program for the de-Russification of Crimea. The biggest issue that we have, and also we had Zelensky said, okay, I'm going to exchange Belgorod for the accession, the PM on NATO. I'm like, this is unfortunate, I'm sorry. These are self-inflicted wounds from the Russian side. These people saying this shit should be killed. It has nothing to do with the stature. And of course, Russians have said things that would come closer, like denazifying the leadership and stuff like that. But except for the one attack on Budanov, nothing. And Ukrainians are doing this every day. They're hitting, of course, it's stupid shit. It's the Ministry of Digital Integration, whatever. But there was one attack, how stupid and how benign it was on the Kremlin. Where is the attack on the Bankova? Where, I mean, they know for sure, it is known that they know where Zelensky was in Kakova. They didn't do anything about it. Twice they saw Zelensky in Konstantinovka because everybody knew he was there. Everybody recognized the Oko station. You have had Budanov in fucking Bahmut, 2 kilometers from the front line. And of course, you have had Prigozhin in Bahmut as well. I'm not gonna. So, this situation, I'm sorry, but these are self-inflicted wounds. The fact that Ukrainians can still think they're going to win. I'm not saying they're not going to lose or going to win. I'm saying that Ukrainians still have this belief. This is due to Russian failures to impact them, or at least the majority of Ukrainians, with the fact that, guys, you cannot win this. We are going to fucking democide you. We are going to turn into fucking Hungary, population-wise. I'm sorry for the Hungaro bros. That's nothing to do with you guys. It's just like, you're going to go down. And this is not impacted. There is nothing that says to the Ukrainians you're going to die, because of course they go to cemeteries. Of course we had this study about how many people were affected, and we found out that out of the people that were asked, at least 80% knew someone wounded, and at least 30% knew someone dead. So casualty rate, well, boom. Of course, you cannot extrapolate right away. It would be too simplistic, but the war was there for everyone. So how the fuck? What's going on? Why these people are so defiant still? Well, they're defiant because one of the objectives that you should have achieved from the beginning, you didn't, because basically you went for Kiev instead of securing Nikolaev. In Kharkov, which should have been a difficult option, but closer and easier to supply, they failed miserably from the get-go. And they showed a complete chaotic organization for the Northern Front. And then you had a situation when basically cities were there, Chernigov especially. Chernigov, and you didn't do anything with it. You literally, the city was choked. I have still footages from the Ukrainian side, 23rd of March and 26th of March. There is only one bridge. They've bombed it. We are suffering. There is no water. There's no food. We are preparing a delegation to ease the humanitarian condition, and so on and so on. They just fucking left. Just left. So at that point, you have this situation where all the defiance that Ukraine are showing, it's your responsibility. Of course, there's propaganda. Of course, it's bullshit. But you are the one who led these people to be defiant to this point. And this, for the Russian leadership, needs to be reevaluated in the sense that, guys, we are not inflicting enough good memories, let's say it like this, to the Ukrainians. And it doesn't matter if 100,000 Ukrainians dead, because at the end, if they have this deal when they can hold most of the shit they have right now, and then they lose maybe the two oblasts in Donbass and Crimea, for them, yeah, of course, it would be, actually, I'm sorry to say it like this, it would be a problem in the sense that from a strict legal point of view, NATO would recognize the annexation of the oblast, which would be a complete failure of its objective. But at the end, Crimea is still a sitting duck. So the only possibility is to have all the oblast annexed. So Kherson Oblast, Zaporizhia Oblast, and then the two friends, and also have a buffer zone in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast and then on Kharkov. But these targets, if this is the goal right now, then okay, just fucking say it. And that's why I'm going back to the reality, to the truth, I said. If this is the goal, it's not a problem. It would actually be so much easier, because then you can have the Russians focus on it, also accept it or not, but at least focus on it. Right now, you're fucking bombing Sumy. You're killing 300 to 400 people a fucking week over there. But what's the goal? Are you going to attack Sumy again? What's the deal in there? And of course, it's part of this holding and this fixation strategy and all the same thing that the Ukrainians do in Kherson. but it's so vague, and there's so much expense for this that at some point you need to at least to tell the Russians what you want, even if it's not what you really want. Even if for you it would be to have half of Ukraine, the eastern Dnieper is done, which would make partial sense. But then you will be just in front of Kiev, and I don't think that Ukrainians are going to be fine with that. But once again, the main issue is here: fucking communicate your goals. That should be the best part of it. Because right now we hear Peskov that the goals are going to be fulfilled. Goals are going to be fulfilled. I'm like, yeah, okay, denazification of Ukraine. What the fuck, man? Decommunization it, okay, then why the fuck are the bridges still up? Where are the dams still up? Where are the power plants still up? Where are the nuclear power plants still up? Why are the fucking airports still up? All those were built during communist time. You want a decommunization? Start with that. You want Ukraine to completely divest in its infrastructure? Just do it. But all this shit makes no sense. And right now, okay, I said. Okay, guys, I'm sorry, something happened. Well, basically, we're back for the Q&A. I'm really sorry. There was a phone call coming in, and I need to cut it. Can you hear me, guys? Guys, can you hear me? Just react if you can hear me. No, okay. Nobody can hear me? No. Okay, guys. Basically, yeah. Well, if you heard the space, you can now ask for interventions. I have no issue. I have no issue with you asking questions. I don't know what's going on. I think my headset went. So yeah, and then Snake as well, because I know that he would have had no problem for that. Yeah. So guys, up to you. I'm gonna start with Ed because a couple of times he was there listening, and he's also we discussed with him. He's another Albanian. Go on, Ed. If you have any kind of question, you can do whatever you need to do. Snake as well, please don't hesitate. And yeah, I'm waiting for whatever you want to ask or discuss. Doesn't matter. So, yes, Ed, come on, no problem. You can intervene. Snake, you also can intervene. You don't actually need to do that. You don't need to ask. I mean, whoever, go up. As I. Hello. Ed, ваш док, Luton.
Regarding the PR situation and the Russian Ministry of Defense, I think the best PR they got is Douglas McGregor, who went even on there on Tucker Carlson last night, and he was shooting some numbers which made what's the name, the spokesperson of the MOD, the general there, Konashenkov, shy. Because he said like 400 dead and 400,000 dead and something like that, And the other guy, Ritter, which is even more joke, maybe because of personal records, and so many are attacking him. But McGregor, he shoots some numbers, but there is some sanity in the claims, because he says that in a direct war, they don't have combined arms warfare anymore capabilities, because focused too much on counterinsurgency and all the rest, And the first thing. The other thing is about the F-16s, which definitely will be coming. But, okay, you got the Greeks and Turks, which use them in air superiority, but I think they are coming more to shoot those JDAMs, because apparently Su-24s were not capable of being modified to carry them, and in numbers, and it was easier to use the Storm Shadows because you pre-program them obviously on the land, and then you just shoot them on tornado pylons. But they need the F-16s to maybe start using those JDAMs, and they are already speaking about Tornadoes and Mirage 2000s and all the rest. So it's going to be interesting what it's coming there.
Yeah, for sure.
Opinion.
No, for sure. Actually, what makes me a bit still doubt is that when you see the delivery schedule from the Danish side, because they actually said what they were going to deliver, and when you know what the Dutch can give, like, okay, maybe in December they're going to have 12 of them. And, okay, once again, 12 is already a lot more than what they can spare right now. And what I agree with you is I don't even think that there was no possibility to modify the Su-24s. What I think is that there's just not enough airframes. You cannot just...
Yeah, they sold it all, probably.
Yeah. So
in the 90s.
And then they can maintain them, but they cannot make them. So on that one, I think the Russians closed an eye when it came to actually air-to-air combat. And shooting them down to work perfectly in the beginning. They lost a lot of capacity. What they didn't do, and this is, I think, a short-sightedness on the Russian part, is that they didn't take out the naked frames that are outside, because those allowed, and we saw at least a couple of pictures of 3 Su-24s with patched parts everywhere. Like, you could see there was a Su-24MR transformed in the Su-24M. So capable of carrying offensive missions, and there were 3 different planes in one. So that part, I think the Russians made a mistake by not taking out the exposed parts to cannibalize. But at the end of the day, the impact was still rather limited. Now, where I'm agreeing with you is that either they're going to be used for GDAMs, but then you're going to still have this problem that you're going to be kinetically inferior to whatever the Russians have. So you are going to either have to use them more often, which means statistically more exposed to anti-aircraft missiles and also air-to-air missiles. But also, it's going to be that you are going to use these airframes that are already rather oldish far more, and in missions that they usually weren't supposed to carry. I'm not saying that the F-16s cannot carry GDAMs. No, I'm saying that whoever was flying these frames, so the Dutch or the Danes, they were not going to put the number of hours that the Ukrainians would need from these planes to make a difference. And it's actually in reality is what happened with the M777. The artillery system is great. It's lighter than everything else. It was used to great effect to wherever it was used by the Americans because they had the complete control. But the moment they started to actually fire from the tubes, they learned a couple of hard truths. And one of them is that the EFC charges were supposed to be equivalent full charge of 2,500 rounds. From the poles was repaired or swapped the barrels, the actual real EFC level is 1,800, so about 2,000 effective full charges for a barrel to be swapped. But that means 500 rounds less. Those 500 rounds less change completely your use plan. So it's going to be the same for the F-16s. right now they are not museum pieces, far from it. But if you start riding them hard, you're going to have the same thing. Also, what was discussed about the Panzer Haubitze 2000 at the beginning, it cannot sustain 100 rounds per day. I don't believe that they ever fired 100 rounds per day from those systems, because it would mean that in about 40 days the barrel was fucked. But you get the drift. If you're going to start using them the way you need to use them, then you're going to have a problem in very short terms. And then you're going to have a bigger footprint of people coming there with parts and shit. And also what these planes were doing, the MiG-29s and the Su-27s and Su-24s, which is like a guerrilla fly point.
Hit and
exactly.
Run.
You are going to start showing up with airfields and transformation and repair points with actual flying fields, or then you're going to start blocking whole highways. And I said this was one of the possibilities to spot also where HIMARS was going, to see the DTP, the local DTP announcements, because for a plane, you don't need like 200 to 500 meters like for the HIMARS to be blocked. You would need a 3 kilometer strip to be blocked for at least 1 or 2 hours, because as you know, first you need to launch off, but then you also need to land somewhere. And in order to land for it, you will have to trail this plane somewhere else. Or
I agree with you, but that's not the case of the F-16s, because they are not operating them from the road. The inlet is very low, and foreign debris issue is there. What's going to happen there is the Gripens, because they already started training the pilots here long before the F-16 was discussed. So, and the Gripen is just for that. Needs 1 kilometer and a sideway there to arm, and how is the philosophy of the Swedes?
But that's why I agree with you.
That's mainly the air-to-air. About the Su-24s, they are cannibalizing. Apparently, they didn't have many engines in the box, old commie style. But I think they just neglected it. They were not expected, like those fields full of tanks outside Malishev, which were left to be rotten and cannot be even regenerated. Differently from the fields in Siberia, which apparently are being emptied.
Yes.
And now the last thing I want to say is about Khodakovsky that you said. I never liked this guy. I think he was a cop, basically a SWAT cop or Alpha or what it was. And now he's playing army, big army. And maybe the Russians, since they went full force in Ukraine, should have been replacing all this DPR, LPR, field commanders, guerrilla warlords, and everyone, and put all them, just like be a more serious thing, not a ragtag army, and the battalion names and whatever.
Yeah, so. But my biggest problem with the situation in DPR, LNR, is that I think, and I'm going to anger a lot of people who are pro-Russians, I think that the Russians thought that the situation would solve itself. Why? These guys were supposed to be less well prepared, less well equipped, so they would go into the offense, get mowed down, and then be replaced easily by Russian units, a bit like the Zeks for Wagner. The problem is that instead of that, they proved, especially a couple of units, a bit better at first contact than some Russian units. And also, war is profiteering anyway. So I think the system in Donetsk of war profiteering reached Russian commanders, local commanders, especially majors and colonels, the way it reaches everyone who could make some quick buck. And so a lot of good feelings were there, especially when you have this discussion when LNR guys say, yeah, Lapin literally pointed a gun at us, or men from Lapin pointed a gun at us and said to go back to the trenches. That's the whole funny point is that, as you said, the Russian army should have completely regimented the area. They didn't, because part of it was the fact that it is a money-making machine for some people, and that's how you had this neglect completely on the Kharkov area, where the commanders there were like, okay, we're making quite a big buck. We don't need this area in absolute sense, because they thought they had already the connection through Donbass. And at the same time, all these fake reports and all this doubt sowing within the Russian telegrams, I always find it a bit weird, because who the fuck announces whatever is going on within the army on Telegram? Moods on that aspect, for instance, is using a lot of anecdotal evidence. For instance, right now it started with the fact that they don't have tires. By the winter, they're not going to be able to move around the mud fields or the ground and whatever. And I'm like, bro, I completely agree with you. Maybe you will not have any kind of tires, but the prime mover for your artillery so far, despite the fact that it is being discussed, has been the MTLB. In the summer, you're using the truck because it's more efficient and consumes less or whatever. But the main point for the Russians has always been the MTLB. On the other side, my biggest problem is also that this war has, for Russia at least, has lasted so long that they have particular structures within it which are very difficult to overcome. And that's why you saw Girkin last so long within the war before getting arrested. That's why you have people like Romanov, who indeed are there from a while and are helping, which makes it a bit unpopular and problematic to basically bash the guy in.
I want to give you an example. Sorry to interrupt you.
No.
It looks like 97 at us, when all collapsed, and they took the army guys and they put them as police officers. But here's the inverse,
Exactly.
And what did they know about the job? And another thing, the bad fuck up they did with their navy, letting everything in the Mediterranean. Now they don't have viable ships. They were like gunning down with an Su-30. A small boat, a bit of overkill, the not fortifying Snake Island and everything, and now the ships are sailing in Romanian waters.
Yeah, but at the other point, it was always going to be like that, because from the Montreal Convention, the Turks were always going to call the shots. And when you see what's happening, what you're going to do? Are you going to blockade Romania, which means you're going to blockade a NATO member? The problem with the Black Sea is it's basically like us with the Ionian Sea and Adriatic. We cannot do shit. Okay, we have a pathway there, but you know what I mean? We have that situation. So on that...
I get it, but they brought up all these landing ships from the North Sea and from the Baltic and whatever. They could have brought few tonnage big ships, these Bikovs. People are complaining that are not even that seaworthy. They even don't have the guns for self-defense against the drones laughable.
That I agree.
AD.
I think the biggest issue is that they were preparing at least a blocking or a landing force for Odessa. They never made past there because they missed Nikolaev. The biggest mistake, I'm going to repeat, if the point was to have a plan B, so basically threaten Kiev, but at the same time grab the south, which to me still remains the goal, because that's what they discussed for ages. Then stop doing the bullshit you did from the beginning in Kharkov, and just let Kharkov breathe, bomb it to pieces, shit it up, whatever you want to do, and then just try Odessa, or at least cut Nikolaev, because once Nikolaev is out, then for Ukraine remains only the delta of the Danube, which is a problem on itself, because it's very intricate to get out there. You can see that now with the Shahids, they can hit Reni. And if they're smart enough, honestly, I'm going to say it, I said it already once, they should just fucking hit a couple of ships there, block the passage, and instead of saying that we're blockading you, I'm sorry, it's debris, it's the result of the war.
You mean play the old Ochakov cruiser they did in Crimea, which they sank on purpose on their strait.
Yeah. And the thing is that Americans have done that for Iran as well, where they did praying mantis. The first thing they did to block access to the Iranian petrol platforms is sinking two heavy ton ships, which made everything almost impossible then for Iranians to organize themselves. It's the same principle here. The only issue, and then that where we're going to be absolutely okay, is that I don't know why the Russians planned this operation Navy-wise the way they did, because the biggest issue that they're going to always have is the fact that Turkey controls the entrance to the Black Sea Fleet. Once it's like that, it's done. You know, Turkey now allows ships to go inbound with patrol ships towards Ukraine. Of course, it's not a big problem because those patrol boats, once again, they're going to eat a Lancet or they're going to eat whatever anti-ship missiles. But the problem is that Turkey in there is your huge liability to whatever you want to do, grain deal, arms transfers, and so on and so on. Now, the other problem that I have with the Russian Black Sea Fleet is something actually very, very, very problematic, is that they don't have enough small, fast boats. And this has nothing to do with the river and patrol boats. They have, I think, like 4 to 6 boats that can be used to basically board container ships. This is very few because by order of magnitude, if you have 20 to 40 container ships, in order to board them, you need to block them for at least 2 to 3 hours. We remember the joke we made about stop the engine, listen to me, and the same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing. If you're going to start blocking, you have to choose which one you want. So most of the times you're going to determine that or deduct that from the water level. So if the ship is fully sunk at the waterline, you know that there is shit inside. If the ship is not fully dipped, then it's empty. That's how they.
You suggest they are playing the Arborea trick in the 70s with you know.
Bro, no.
How the T-59s came.
Yeah, but no, bro, no. I have this problem with if the Russians were that smart or that mental. We wouldn't be in this situation. For some reason, they are smart, but they have made some absolutely horrendous choices. Mostly, I think, by underestimating Ukraine. So, yeah.
Yeah, I understand. But, you know, if the cheap solution is there, they have the kilos. Yeah. So just torpedo fuel, like you said there, and it's done. You just block the strait and give a message. And I would go back in Snake Island this time with a prepared defense, you know, fortifying it somehow.
I honestly, I cannot do that because I wouldn't do that. It's just too, man, it's really a polygon. It's a ready-made polygon, that shit. It's 2 square kilometer. Whoever wants, no, what I'm saying, not 2 square kilometer. It's so small that now that they have the HIMARS, they're just going to fucking park something in there and fire at you from 30 kilometers from within the coast. So the situation, in my opinion, is something else, and I'm ready to actually agree with you. What should be done is that at least nobody should have Snake Island. And we've seen that they have been there a couple of times. One of those times, apparently, they also have put fuel cells for their shitty Magura or whatever.
Starlink.
Yes, that too. But they also have put fuel cells for the USVs, so for the drones.
Okay.
So and this is because the Russian Black Sea Fleet and the Russian Navy in the Black Sea. I don't think it was an afterthought, but operated with a simple and classical view on what was going to happen in Black Sea Fleet. So basically, we're going to go there, sink all their ships, just do a landing in Odessa, a couple of weeks of combat to free the city, and then we hold the city. because then we're going to have the link up with Nikolaev, Yuzhny, and so on and so on and so on. However, this ignored that the Russians couldn't cut through Nikolaev. The city itself is huge, and it's very complicated to go through. So, of course, the choice was, in a sense, to go through and go all over it with 2 BTGs. I mean, how stupid do you have to be to try and cut through that distance with 1,300 people?
Well, Sushko didn't have more people. I'm sorry, he was a good general. I think it was wrong to fire him, but Zushko, right? Zushko, how was, So basically, he went far than everybody.
Yeah,
so.
But anyway, that's what I want to tell you. That's what's my biggest problem. So yeah, I think we can.
Okay,
no
thank
problem,
you.
man. Tefala.
Kalishmir, bye.
Snake, it's your turn. I'm sorry, but it was Albanian Mafia talk, so yeah.
Yeah, that's all right. The question is with the Gripens, like that, since that was mentioned. How many Gripens are slated to be sent, or any speculation or estimates?
To be honest,
Ed, did you have any idea?
It's 30, I think. AB, we're talking, because they are taking the EF, so it's going to be the first versions, just air-to-air.
Okay, so
AB.
this. Yeah, I mean, the big question is the pilot train pipeline, because right now for the F-16s, they have 32 in the pipe, and all but like 8 of them are actually in English classes right now. So until next year sometime when they actually begin to train on planes. And here's the other thing that's really fucked up. So this is why here, these are fresh pilots. They're actually not doing the sensible thing, transitioning like experienced pilots. They're actually having green cadets.
If I can say something,
sure.
If the school is the Eastern one, now he can correct me, but I think they are pilots. They are young guys, so they're going to be the wisest cream of the military academies for sure, because this was the case in the East. And I think they do around 120 hours in basic trainer. The helic plane and the plane with the helic, and then they go into jets, and they do 70 hours in jets. This was the Eastern school, I think, before they go into the fighters. So they're gonna pack hours. Duracell strategy, I think. So.
Yeah, but here's the thing: like they're not going to be as experienced as an actual like jet pilot. The sensible thing would be to get experienced pilots, train them, and then have them also train other pilots. But they're doing this thing where they're basically taking the academy guys and training them up. This is going to take more time. That's the thing, and unfortunately, the Ukraine, like if you look at the schedule of deliveries, I mean they are. I think Denmark released their schedules like 6 for this year, 8 for next year, and 2 for 20 and 5 for 2025. And the reason why the schedule's like this again is because I mean I think you guys mentioned the situation with the cobbling together frames. I think something similar is actually happening here. Like they have to patch them up because like not all these frames are actually airworthy, and these are, if you look at the delivery dates for these frames, these are some of the oldest frames ever exported. I mean, they were delivered between like 1980 and 1985. So they're basically 40-year-old frames. And even though they have had a midlife update, they're still like in the United States stateside, like these frames are like unsafe. They're basically condemned. The original like F-16As. So they basically have to do some work to patch them up, which is why they will be fairly slow in providing them. And I think a similar situation might exist with others or deliveries. And this is actually something that, again, the people have asked like why the Ukrainian Air Force has been able to replenish itself is because it has like this vast pool of Soviet era replacement parts that they can use to patch up planes and get frames into the air. This is a situation with any military vehicle. And I think there's an earlier report that this is something that Ukrainians were actually even starting to do with the Bradleys. So these Bradleys that they received that were, quote unquote, fresh back in June, they're already reserving a portion of them for cannibalization. to just keep the other ones operating. So like actually just by operating, just by driving them around, these are breaking, and these are affecting operational readiness. I mean, this is ultimately. Sorry, go ahead.
No. What I want to say, I wanted to add two things. They are forced to send those young guys as pilots because they need every single fucking pilot that they can to actually try and stave off Russian attacks and try and also, have a modicum of air force. Also, one of the biggest problem is that a lot of actual pilots were killed. We don't say it enough, but Ukraine has lost known over 250 pilots, but we think that's a lot more because we have MIA people. We also something that I wanted to tell is Ukraine doesn't have L-39s that are flying anymore. Well, we have seen a couple of them on the ground, but the training that is being done now is mostly on propellers. And the thing that I wanted to tell as well is that those 32 pilots going there is going to be the first class of 2023. Most of the guys that are formed right now in Ukraine to fly mostly, they are flying on 2 Slovak jets that were reserved for that, and all the rest go to Germany or France right now for familiarization with actual flight objects, as we call that in France, in French. Donc familiarisation d'objets volants, which means basically they are starting the new training over there. Also, what is supposed to be given from Sweden, we don't really know. It could be 30, it could be 50, it doesn't matter. But right now, the Swedish government says we are not giving anything, which in my opinion is a lie. And I agree with Ed. They are going to have to do it like this. Air-to-air is going to be with Gripen. And as for the Bradleys, I want to tell you something. You are 100% right, but it's even worse than that. I made a small diagram, and I'm going to post it on Twitter. The moving distance, if we take Omelnik as the repair and transfer point, from Omelnik to the fire line, if they have done this 10 times, it's 80 kilometers. So those Bradleys have already 800 kilometers within 2 months as a minimum. I'm not saying the Bradleys are burnt, but those that made it back and those that has been used on and off. So basically, if we put this on, they should already within 200 kilometers have a couple of equipment changed, especially the tracks. One of the things is when you have to see a couple of videos from the Bradleys destroyed. Those that didn't burn off, some of the tracks and track pins are in a really dire state. It could be because of the explosion, but I don't think so. I think that it's already traces of wear and tear, and the Bradleys that were sent. The excess Bradleys that were sent was as replacements first, but also foremost, as you said, also to be able to have parts for Bradleys that are going to be needed to be repaired. And also there's this choice that have been apparently made by the US of not repairing what is not reasonable to repair right away or economical to repair right away, but replace one-to-one. So America is literally going the Soviet way. Your T-34 is fucked up, just leave it in the yard, take another one and go on. And this means that T-34 that you have on the backyard...
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
It's not a complete loss, of course, but you never know what's going to happen with it. Are you going to just salvage half of it? Are we going to salvage the whole tank? Are you going to salvage parts? So that's why I want to actually reinforce what you said, Snake. In this case, I really, on that aspect, I know a little bit more. For the rest, for planes and so on, I'm not going to discuss more. But when it comes to the armored vehicles part, I think the biggest problem right now is that the Ukrainians have chosen their staging points way too far because they are not confident enough in not getting bombed close enough to the line. And that's why they got seen so far. However, in the long term, it will not matter, in my opinion, because America will have to make a choice. Either, as I said, slate 10% of its active fleet for the what active fleet of its whole fleet for Ukraine, or say, okay, we stop the losses here and we rotate the shit show to someone else, which would be interesting because I know that the Germans have still some martyrs to give. They could fill up the gaps, and the control and commands are not that much different. And in my opinion, they offer a more viable solution for the war Ukraine is having right now instead of the Bradleys. That's, of course, my opinion.
Yeah, and if they get the Abrams, which they're getting 30 and up, America's committed up to 50, it's going to be even more of a shit show because it is like a 65-ton vehicle. And like the wear and tears are going to be that much worse. And like also people who have like been in U.S. military exercises more or less say that, it's not uncommon for Abrams to have an engine change after like a 3-week exercise. If you put any kind of strain on it, like again, these like military vehicles. If people understand, like you have to. Their reliability is based on your ability to supply spare parts. If you can't do that, they really break down very quickly. And 800 kilometers, like basically Abrams needs an overhaul after 500 kilometers. I mean, you will not even make it 800 kilometers typically without some extensive servicing. So, like this is. I mean, the question for the U.S. is like if you send anything to Ukraine, it's going to basically spoil like fruit within a couple of months because of this logistic situation.
So yeah, basically we agree on that one. Yeah, guys, whatever you want to join us, please feel free to ask. I will just add you to the discussion. One last point I wanted to tell to everybody is the situation actually with the Lancet. I don't know if you have noticed, or if you go to Lost Armor, you're gonna see it. Lancets have gone back in the back burner in the sense that we see them a lot in the north or in Bakhmut, but in Zaporozhye, the three last Lancets that we saw were like fireman usage. So one of them hit a stock T90M. I still don't know whose tank was it. I think it was the Russian one trying to move out from fire and who got immobilized. But it would also not surprise me that it was one captured tank, because we saw one Lancet strike on a T90M looking like vehicle early on in June. So maybe that tank was just returned against its former employers. And also, that doesn't mean that there are less Lancets or whatever. It means that the Russians have moved away from trying to use the Lancets now as a barrage, as a gate, and are going way deeper. So I think in the coming day we're going to have these solutions, or the one of the solutions for this riddle. And we're going to have probably a lot more artillery vehicles and artillery systems getting hit, or long-term anti-radar employment, also anti-electronical warfare. One thing that we are hearing as well, and I want to add to this, is that apparently the Orion is being transformed to be able to fire Lancets on the fly. I personally don't understand this. Why I don't understand? Because first of all, it's going to augment the drag of the Orion. So unless it's a different type of Lancet with a retractable flying wing, this would be a foldable, in this case, flying wing, a bit like the new model Lancet that's coming up. Then it's interesting, but the Lancet itself being about 22 kilos enclosed and 80 kilos in flight, I don't really see the point, except for, of course, being able to launch them without having a ground connection, which is also dangerous, because you can be spotted while doing that. Then you can just like fly them. However, as we spoke already a couple of times, the Lancet is extremely, extremely driftable. So I don't understand this situation. What are they going to do with it? Are they going to like let it plunge up until like 500 meters, and then from that 500 meters deploy it, launch the electrical engine, and then let it fly? Maybe. I don't have any kind of insight on that, so I'm not going to start making up things. But to me, it seems a lot like a lost time frame, when instead of doing that, it should have started to insist into integrating the Izdeliye 305 into the Orion or the Sirius, which would allow then an actual capability with a lot of payload, instead of using the Lancet, which is an excellent system. We have spoken about it a couple of times, but who actually doesn't benefit much from a air-launched system, except for, of course, being able to be launched very deep. So basically, instead of launching it from 30 kilometers or 15 kilometers like it's doing now, the Orion can get up to 5 kilometers from the lock, pop them out, get the hell out, and then the Lancets then can have this extra oomph and extra range. As we saw when they are fired from 10 kilometers behind the lock, they can go up to 60 at least. Therefore, firing them closer and being able to, have them always ready, instead of, finding a targeting spot, pulling your catapult, mounting the Lancet, sending it flying. Given that you need to also fly until the lock, at 10 kilometers, you're going to lose like about 10 minutes or something. So reactivity-wise, it makes sense. What doesn't make sense is that why giving them to a system like the Orion, who itself should be able to loiter. Now, it makes sense if the Orion comes close enough, has a way better optical sight than the Zala 421. Then yes, because then the Orion can spot some things from 30 kilometers away. Also mark them, have a coordinate range, and then send the Lancet. So that all this makes sense in the overall view, but I still have doubts about the deployment from the Orion, because maybe call me old school or whatever. I would like the Orion to be doing what he's doing right now, which is a lot more intelligence and ISR and some strikes, instead of reinventing the strike platform, but with the tools that may or may be not correct, in the sense that, in my opinion, it would be better to have these containerized Lancets, drive with the car, pop them out, not far from the lock, the car moves away, and the Orion does just its job, which is like detecting main targets, and then Lancets do their job. Anyway, just food for thought.
I mean, there's another thing that has actually been brought to my attention. You may have actually seen this in ISC. Is like, apparently there is some kind of like some kind of project that's actually trying to mount a camera on a Giran, and this is something that is apparently inferred by a mutual of ours, who basically said that there was a very large order placed for digital signal processors, and this is probably the kind that would be fitted on a drone. And there's like, essentially, there's some kind of talk that this be put on Giran. The question is like, for what kind of use would this system have? And one speculation was that you could use this essentially to send it along rail traffic and to hit trains. I mean, would that be a viable use of this kind of system if it's developed?
You mean a Giran with electro-optronic system, right?
Yes, with the camera.
But that's the Izdeliye 54, and it's indeed Aeroscan/Zala has decided that instead of sitting with their asses between two chairs, which is like, you know, developing slow tactical systems. They are now trying to become independent from Iran on some aspects. It's true that right now the licensing that has been done for the Shahid in Russia has. There's something I want to talk about later, but while we are at it and you open this situation, a couple of companies in Russia are not very happy with what happened with the Shahid situation. Why? For a while, Russia paid apparently extremely. They pay too much. Basically, the optics from a couple of Russian drone manufacturers was that the price that has been floated around, which is $42,000 for one Geran system, was too much, and they couldn't do it cheaper. I do not believe that. I think that if indeed the price was 42,000, every single penny was well spent. TT 125 did a research, and also Conflict for Research Armament did also their own calculus. All the parts in the Geran amounted to about $17,000 maximum, depending on the trade day, because there were some like glass spine and stuff like that would cost up to half less or more, depending where you bought them, which trader, and so on. So yeah, about 70,000 was the price. Add some manpower, some labor costs plus transfer, you would be at 30,000 more or less. But that is also, once again, if you buy it by the piece. If you, of course, do economies of scale, it's completely different, you know. The biggest problem that we have is that I don't want this soaring. If the Russians really think that they can get beyond the situation and have a better deal by doing it themselves, then okay. But the point is not to start having a row with Iran, because Iran literally saved the strategic scope of the Russian aerospace forces by accepting to sell the Geran, and also accepting to sell the secrets behind it, especially the structure of the Geran. This honeycomb structure has been replaced by the Russians, because it's cheaper, by just a fiberglass system. The difference in radar reflection is almost zero, but it's indeed cheaper. It's true. However, you know, it makes sense for something like the geraniums and shahids to be a bit cheaper and streamlined and wartime production. But still, the fact that apparently some Russian drone companies have been pissed by the fact that Putin, or whoever you want to call it, were ready to pay and paid 40K plus for one Geran assembled, while they were apparently unwilling to invest into Russian companies. It made companies, in this case like Zala, Aeroscan, just
Yeah, the audio is actually cut out for me. I've been having trouble with these spaces. I'll leave and be right back. This is very annoying.
I'm really sorry, guys. So basically, just to end this situation with the Geran. So basically, PZLF 54 apparently is going to use almost the same platform as the Geran, almost the same, because apparently it would have a probe looking a bit more like a Kasef, and we also have no idea on how much the wingspan will be, how much the extent is going to be, which is basically the problem that we're having right now. Is it going to be a Kasef, so limited to 200 to 300 kilometers, or is it going to be a real Geran, so minimum 500 kilometers of range? That's the the biggest situation that we have right now.
Right. Sorry. But anyway, the thing that I just wanted to ask is, our friend was just asking, like, a system like a Guran that would carry, let's say, a 50 kilogram charge, and then have a range of 500,000 kilometers with a very long loiter time potentially. If you were to mount a drone, like drone camera on it, that could automatically lock in and attack targets of opportunity. Like, could something like that be used to like shut down rail traffic?
Yes, that's what Azeris did in. It wasn't rail traffic; it was road traffic. Azeris did that in the Karabakh War. Okay, the network was a lot smaller. You had about 120 kilometers to survey, but also they only used 200 tarops during the whole war. Part of them went to anti-aircraft batteries. Part of them went to concentration for artillery, and a lot of them went to stopping trucks and stopping very valuable systems from transiting through the roads of Nagorno-Karabakh. The biggest situation here, and that's why I'm agreeing with you that that's what should happen, is that the Russians already know the attack in the Mezhova train station in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast shows that they know the rail network. It's not a big deal. They've basically built them, So why there is not at least a attempt via Zala to lock the train traffic? Honestly, I don't know, and I don't want to start knowing because it makes no sense to me, given they've proven that even the Lancets can do 60. So, in a sense, blocking Pokrovsk should be possible. That's 40 kilometers, and you don't need to destroy the rail. You need to take out your locomotive.
Fine.
So even with a Lancet, you can cripple these systems, because the best part is once you lock your locomotive in there and you block it in the middle of nowhere, or you cut a catenary or your connection, the electrical power lines, it's done. You basically did what you need to do. Okay, it's not permanent. It's going to take a couple of hours or a couple of days for the Ukrainians to 100% be there, but then you send another loitering ammunition. So that solution for short-term distribution is there. And in a sense, that's what I complained, that we see a strike on that station last year and this year more or less on the same period of time. But it's this, given that they have the Shahids, should have been a normal occurrence, and instead of making these grants attack other, the attacks are interesting, so the port storage units and so on, but you could also send the grants flying all over the southeastern Ukraine, not very deep, maybe 60 to 70 kilometers, and just start striking substations and transformers and paralyze the train traffic. That's not something unheard of, but for some reason it's not happening. So yeah, once again the enigma of the Russian Ministry of Defense.
Well, I mean, supposedly the big order has been placed for these chips, so hopefully we will see something in the next few months.
But for sure. But one of the things that Araskan announced is the F-54. My only issue with it is, what is it exactly? Is it a copy or an attempted copy of the Harop? If it's like that, then, oh my God, we're going to have a lot of changes in the battlefield. It's not going to be always positive because, at some point, given that these drones are bigger, Ukrainians are going to have to fire a lot more manpads at the and that's my problem right now. Mm-hmm. That's my problem right now. Yeah. It's that why is it happening right now? They have this technology, at least they can profit from this technology for now at least 8 months. It cannot be that complicated, but apparently it is that complicated.
Well, I mean, look, this order that came to the channels was 100,000 chips. They haven't. They may not have even been fabbed yet, but they're right now. It's just an order that's just happened in the last couple of months. So the thing is like again, like they're going to get a large number of these chips to do something with it. And I hope they do something good with this. So the Russian drone industry does something good with it. But yeah.
My biggest problem with the Russians right now is that they are suffering still from a couple of things. Couple of things that are happening is they are over-focusing on certain products, and those products are very necessary. So when you see the FPV production, of course, a huge part of it is being purchased by volunteers. The situation, however, and this is where we have a big problem. The situation, however, is that I'm not seeing beyond it. Of course, we saw this detection system, and maybe, who knows, it's going to even be an automated targeting system. But at the same time, that thing, when you see how it was already applied on the Lancet and how it's already applied on on the Switchblade, both variants, and also how the Poles tried to adapt it on the Warmate, I think it should have been there for a while, because finally it's not that much of a deal. And the type of cameras they can buy, they're both Chinese. The one on the Warmate comes from a Chinese company that they're indigenized. So in a sense, all these things are going in a good direction. They're a bit slow, but at the same time, I don't understand why, because the effort, of course, they have a war right now, so I can understand why everything is going to take a bit of time, because they have other pressing matters to solve. But I'm not disappointed, quite the contrary, but I'm still seeing that they are, for instance, FPVs are coming more and more online. There's more and more talk about trying to make FPVs a lot more self-supportive, and also a lot more drone pilot schools opening left and right. There are also a lot more vision on what to do with the FPVs and combine that with other stuff. Right now, you have this dronathon in Russia with kids literally building means to kill other human beings, and apparently it's completely different from last year. Last year was literally a shit show with a couple of fat guys being there showing stuff. Now you got students that have apparently also found a way to network multiple FPVs. And so basically one guy can control 4 or 5 of them. And this is the main difference. This is what I was saying. FPV right now is a shooter rifle situation, when one guy has one rifle, so you need to have 10 guys with one rifle to shoot 10 times, and you have this ranked fire barrage. But now if you have one guy that can basically pinpoint something that's the swarm that the Chinese already have, and also that Zala supposedly was supposed to have, well, then you are creating a completely different environment for the Ukrainians. And this makes me a bit, afraid, in the sense that it's so slow. It's getting there. It's so slow, but I'm saying, like, they are preparing for this war to go in 24, have a lot of damage on both sides, and make it to a situation when, as I said to you, right now the Ukrainians, they don't feel the pain as much as they should. And I don't say they should feel pain. It's not that, but I mean, in the view of the Russian military, they should feel a lot more pain and be a lot more real, let's say it like this. But the problem with what is coming is that suddenly, what the kind of pain they are feeling right now is going to triple once out of the blue for the normal Ukraine. I'm not saying for the soldier, because for the soldier, as I told you, there was this New Zealander guy or whatever, South Africa, I think, in the Criminal Forest, who said like, "Oh guys, please, we need something anti drones like yesterday, because right now I'm having nightmares from them." And that part already exists right now. But if now you have 5 guys that instead of saying 5 drones and 25 and control them more or less perfectly, then the damage, the upgrade, let's say it like this, the damage that Ukraine is going to get, and probably the Russians as well, because it's rarely a clear-cut situation, is going to push for sure the Ukrainians to rethink the whole, we are winning, or we don't want to negotiate for territory, because that's what's going on. Ukrainians still are 90% opposed to negotiating for the territory. But it's also going to, I think, open up into a completely different reality for a lot of other people, not only for Ukrainians, but I think also for Europeans, because the main target audience for Russia right now is not the US. Americans don't care. They're too far. They can give a lot of money because it's monopoly money, more or less. But Europeans are seeing a lot of these refugees come back, and there are 3 military hospitals in Lanchtu who right now have over 800 amputees from Ukraine. And these guys are like, okay, it's going to blow up at some point, but we need to circulate these guys, because there are people who are in Kiev waiting to be rotated in Germany, and people who are in Germany who don't want to go back to Kiev because the sanitation system and sanitation conditions are not going to be as good. So you're going to also learn about this situation as well in the upcoming future, and this also is touches Russia as well. It's war. A lot of things are shared commonly in this war, and the worst is that the 2 populations are extremely close. For me, the same, but extremely close. So yes, I agree with you. There are a lot of things that should be done, good things, but my biggest concern with the Russians is that they are still monofocused on how they should wage a war with a certain type of things. The VKS hasn't changed too much. Of course, now it's standoff munitions, but normally it should have already had standoff munitions with the KH-25, 27, 29. So all these things that you're seeing is like, fundamentally, the Russians are applying things that they already know with tools that they can use now. But there is no, I feel that there is an attempt to go beyond that, but it's still not there. And I had this feeling about the Sirius coming up, and now we learn, and you're gonna hear from Fighter Bomber, that the Sirius tests were positive, but right now the Ministry of Defense doesn't feel that it's the appropriate time to introduce it into the field unless the AD situation hasn't been solved. But the whole point of a system like Sirius, Orion, or Forepost is to risk a flying asset without risking a pilot. So once again, we are in this mentality that you don't want to lose an asset, but fucking hell, you're in war. You're losing tens of 1,000 guys per trimester or whatever, but you don't want to risk. You don't want to risk a piece of metal. This is also something that I think will need to change at some point, and completely disregards how the Russians would see the war. So basically, in this case, it's needed, so we need to do it. There is still this bean counter mentality from the Russian Ministry of Defense that I don't get. And don't get me started on the fact they don't have the money. It doesn't make any sense to speak about money, given most of the pieces on the Orion can be bought, and instead of paying for 2,000, 3,000 body armors extra, you can assemble 5 to 10 Orions extra. Those choices to my brain still are a bit. I don't get them. So yeah. Sorry for the long rant. Guys, if anyone wants to contribute more, Snack, if you want to add anything, be my guest.
Well, I mean, this is the way it always kind of goes. I mean, if you look at the year-to-year Wehrmacht casualties, I mean, essentially half of the German military's casualties came in the last 11 months of the war. Well, the fatalities, about 2.5 million came in the last less than 1 year. So this is, I mean, basically, if you look at year to year, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, like it's like an exponential growth curve. And this is the way it always happens. Like you think you have it handled, and then basically shit just completely goes off the rails. I mean, when the collapse happens, it really just everything accelerates downward. So I mean, basically, like what we're seeing drone production, and also the very large chip orders that we're seeing from Russian industry, like it is it's apparent that there will be a much larger build out of drones for the military, and starting this year and also in 2024, and that is actually going to cause a bit of alarm. I mean, basically, it would be like the moment when you realize the Azeris won in Nagorno-Karabakh. Of course, this is going to be on a much larger scale, and it's going to cause much more population displacement. I mean, it is as it is. I mean, this is. I mean, I don't view this as necessarily Russia's fault either, because again, like Ukrainians have this strategy of gaslighting everybody. So no matter what happens, they completely they've gaslit everyone and thinking that they are Superman.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's it for now. Have a nice day, guys, and we'll see each other next time. Bye.
All right. Later.